at the CPC website, either by email or by letter or otherwise. We are now at the stage of the final review of the projects before we come to vote on our recommendations next week. So as we have stated in the CPC application, at this point in time, we are looking for projects with maturity that are fully developed and don't need further definition. Project that stands alone, that we can complete and won't necessarily involve unknown future initiatives. Projects that are timely, that need to be done at this time, or an opportunity may be lost. And we are looking to leverage private resources with respect to projects to the extent that that is available, but we are also willing to look as to whether something can only be done because this is the only source of capital for that project. And we are looking to see if the projects are within the scope of the long-term planning objectives of the town of Hingham with respect to historic preservation, conservation, recreation, and affordable housing. So having said that, I think I would welcome our first proponents to come forward with respect to the Hingham Historical Collections Plan. Ms. McCracken.
Yes. I'm Eileen McCracken. I'm the chairman of the Historical Archives Task Force. And the first thing that I have to tell you is that we originally had asked for $65,000. We would like to change that to $35,000. We had a vote of the committee from what we have is a balance that we will have left at the end of this fiscal year. We feel as though the $35,000 will be able to take. We would like to continue with in the next fiscal year. I have Jen Williams with me today. She is our archivist that we have hired to do all of our work for us, and she's going to bring you through what we've done so far and where we're going.
So if this will get you through the next CPA funding cycle?
Yes.
And but we are looking at ongoing historical archive preservation in the future.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jen?
Hi, my name is Jen Williams, like Eileen said. Thank you very much for having us here today. Very excited. So what I did is you should have a packet for people to take away and look at as they're contemplating. So what I just wanted to start with today is kind of updating you on what we've done. We've given you our grant, but of course things have developed since then. So what I wanted to start with is really talking about the materials that we're working with. We have a lot of historic documents going back to the 17th century. We're currently at the Hingham Public Library, and what we're focusing on right now is preserving these materials, making them accessible, and one of the ways that we're doing that, if you look, the first document that you have is what we call a finding aid. And it's kind of like a library catalog record, but as you can see, this one is 7 pages long, so it's a lot more extensive than a library record. And so this is how we are getting these materials arranged and described so people can understand what they're looking at when they come. But this is only the first step. We have 3 right now that are completely done. We have 7 more that are in the draft stage. And when they're done, the second document that you have is a WorldCat record. So what we're doing is we don't want to just have these materials available because they can be available and no one knows that you have them, and it's basically like they don't even exist. So one of the ways that we're trying to get people to see what we have is putting records on WorldCat. That is a worldwide catalog for all different types of materials. College students, professors, people all over the world, as I said, will be able to search this record. It'll show them that they can go to the Hingham Public Library, and so it's a really great resource. So that's one of the things that we're doing. And a lot of the work that we're doing, I wanted to point out, is being done by volunteers and interns. We're actually, one of the ways that we've been able to save up some of the money that we've had is by using these free resources that probably about $12,000 we have been able to save using their volunteer work, and they're fabulous. They're doing a great job. And of course, I oversee everything that they do, so they're not just kind of doing whatever they want willy-nilly. So, you know, that's kind of what we're doing with finding aids. We're also doing outreach, which is basically kind of like WorldCat, going out and showing people what we have. The third document that you have, and I'm going really fast because I know we have a short period of time, so.
Take a breath, though, take a breath.
So that is a brochure that I created that is being, it's all over the library and for people to look at. And I originally created 150, and I've had to print more and more because people are constantly taking them. It's been fantastic. And we've actually had people come and use the collection because they saw the brochure. We had a man, actually the manager of Trader Joe's, came and wanted to look at our glass slide negatives to put up in his store because he saw the brochure. So we're making people aware. It's fantastic. We've also had posters made that are they look similar to this. Of course, they're bigger. That we're currently deciding where in the library we want to put them. And we're also focusing on online presence because, you know, every week you see people as they're waiting on their phones, searching things on the internet. A lot of people, especially younger people, will say, if I can't find it on the internet, it doesn't exist. So we have a website. It's an Omeka website, and the last document that you have shows an exhibit that we created. And it's called Legendary Locals. It talks about important people in Hingham's history, political figures, reformers, military figures, men, women, all different ethnic groups, all different subjects. And so that is going to be up in the next couple of weeks. And we're going to promote it. We're going to have an article in the Hingham Journal. I'm going to be talking about it in a small article for the Society of American Archivists newsletter. So a lot going on with the online presence. And we also have, of course, the Free Soil Reunion Party papers. And those have been up for quite a while, and they're getting a lot of use. So next steps, you know, what are we doing? What do we want this funding for? The next step is, as we go through the library's materials, we're actually doing it very quickly. We should be finishing it very soon. But, you know, we want to make sure we have everything all set before we go. We're going to finish the finding aids. We are going to redesign the website. We're working with a children's librarian so that the materials will be more pronounced. They'll have, on the main navigation bar, they'll have a button and a whole section and a lot of information. All the finding aids will be on there, other resources, links to other websites, including the Omeka website. And we're going to be, of course, we've created policies and procedures for these materials to make sure that, you know, in the future, they know what to do if something comes along. You know, how do we put this as part of our collection? Because it's a little bit different than libraries. So we want to make sure that all of that is all set. In the beginning of February, an intern named Natalie and myself, as well as our volunteers, are going to start coming part-time over to the town hall, working on the town clerk's records. That's a big undertaking. There's a lot of records, a lot more than at the Hingham Public Library, and that's going to involve, you know, looking at materials, what's there, what needs to be done with it, is there anything that shouldn't be there, and then we have to preserve it and make finding aids for it. So there's a lot to do. And then, of course, we have to actually start doing all of that. And once we're done with the clerk's office, we're going to move on to the school department and planning board. So this is all, you know, the clerk's office, the planning board, the school department, all of that will be going into next year and getting all of that done. And I know I'm talking really fast, so I just want to say that in case, you know, I don't know how many, you guys are all here, so you know the importance of the town of Hingham. I, as an archivist, have worked in a lot of different places. This is one of the most fantastic collections in this town I have ever seen. I actually tell people, some of my friends, I have friends, of course, we're all, you know, into history. I have a friend who loves the Revolutionary War history who's making a trip down here because I told her what's in the records. So what's here is so important. And, you know, you talked about missed opportunities. These are things, a lot of them that are so old, that if something isn't done to conserve them, to preserve them, they will be lost and you cannot get them back. So I cannot stress the importance of this project.
Thanks for all the great work. Any questions or comments by committee members?
This is excellent.
Yeah, I want just to comment, I knew we were trying to preserve the records, but I'm really impressed with the idea of the outreach and actually now worldwide. I mean, I had no idea that that was even possible. So I think just the fact of opening this up to people is an extra 50% on the good work that we were just preserving the records in the first time. So I think it's very impressive. And I applaud the use of interns. I know that had come up in some earlier discussions. And I'm glad that we're leveraging, students who can, as part of their, their training, that they can participate in this as well.
Yeah, it's one of the great things. I'm a big promoter. Simmons College is just up in Boston, and all of the interns and volunteers are either current Simmons students in the archives program or past Simmons students who have graduated. So there's actually a lot of people in the area who are really, really interested and really want to help. So it's been great.
I think it's great.
Any questions or comments from the public? Thank you, Eileen. Thank you, Jane.
All right, thank you.
Very much. And our next proponent is Abby Pearsall, the Conservation Fund.
All about
All right, once again, I'm Abby Pearsall with the Planning Office for Conservation. And the first item I have up before you is the Conservation Fund. You should have in your packets an updated sheet from the original one that I provided to you. I've given an updated balance as well as an update to the actual funding request. Originally, when I came before, I had an additional request before the CPC for $15,000 to cover 3 of the acquired conservation lands, Scotland Street, Main Street, and the Sydney's Pond area from last year that did not have conservation restriction money set aside for them, or it was used for other purposes in the course of acquiring and managing those properties. So I've included that in this particular proposal. So you see that the request has now gone up from $30,000 to $45,000. So that's that reason there. I won't go too much into detail because I know we've talked about the Conservation Fund pretty extensively, but just for folks at home, the Conservation Fund is essentially the only direct financial mechanism that the Conservation Commission has to support property acquisition and capital improvements on conservation land. This is sort of the operating budget of the Commission to do the non-regulatory work that it does in terms of providing services in the open spaces of the town of Hingham. So it's a pretty important budget to continue providing those services. The nice thing about the Conservation Fund is that expenditures can be authorized by the Commission during its regular meetings. There doesn't have to be a town meeting vote. It's money that's appropriated to be flexible, to be used for this purpose, so that it can be used as items come up. And as we know from our property acquisitions, such as last year's acquisition, as well as some of the ones that we'll talk about tomorrow night, having that flexibility to be able to get opinions of cost, appraisals, other pieces are pretty important. So again, the other piece that the Conservation Commission can look to use this fund for is leverage for grant opportunities. So one of the things that I think that's important to note in the funding balance, the current balance now is about $43,000. It's a good chunk of change if we add to it to be able to look for things like leveraging Safe Routes to Schools money if we get something like the Trails Plan in place. Looking for opportunities to say where can the Commission partner with other agencies throughout the state, private organizations, and start to leverage funding and lend some financial support to get applications off the ground. So that's the third big way that the fund can be used. I provided you with a list of items on the right-hand side of your sheet that essentially outlines what that $45,000 would be used for. So the idea here was not to simply request a sum of money, but to show you what we plan to do with it if we get it. And I guess from there I can answer questions and. Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you're tying your hands too much by specifying exactly how you use all of it. Shouldn't you have a little slack there?
It may be, yeah. And again, there's once.
This adds up to 45.
Mm-hmm. Once the money comes over to the Commission, there is some leeway. So if something says, $6,500 and it's really $7,500 is from something else, it's really meant to be a guide, that this is the estimate that we think it's going to cost to complete these projects that are listed. And those have been identified through staff as some opportunities coming up to improve some of the lands that we've had for a while. But yes, there may be some movement.
Quite pressing, and a one-time opportunity, maybe one of these could be deferred. I mean, you have some flexibility.
Well, and
Right.
I guess for Kathy, as the project manager, you wouldn't anticipate
writing the warrant article in a form with this degree of specificity. It would be more open-ended, although Abby knows there's certain reimbursements that we know from last year with Sydney's Pond. We know that there's some specific encumbrances we need to deal with, as well as the conservation restrictions. And then there is this sort of more open-ended piece, I think, Jim, for due diligence property appraisals that is not specified. So
I think
I appreciate this degree of detail, even if the warrant article doesn't require it, or.
Right.
Yeah, and I just think the question probably is when we look at how much, how the balance is working, is $40,000 of sort of unallocated cash too much or too little? Should that be shaved? I mean, that'll be part of the discussion.
I think this is really good because it'll save you from, if something does come up, come in for a reserve fund transfer.
Mm-hmm.
A question on the Foundry Pond Dam engineering inspection. Is that going to be an annual expense?
It's not, no. And it's a dam, it's a low priority dam, so every 10 years it needs to be inspected, so we're up for that inspection now.
Now, is that an in-house job or would that be done through a bid?
We would need to bid that, so that's something that we would
Thank
put
you.
out with proposals, yep.
I'll only comment that the Conservation Fund has been a very important fund for this committee in terms of valuation of open space for acquisition and for recreation. So I think, as Matt observed, that you do want to build in as much flexibility as possible.
And I'll note the specific request here for the conservation restrictions on three previous acquisitions. I know that we've had some discussions on this committee prospectively incorporating in the line item, in the warrant article item, the cost attached to the conservation restriction moving forward with the specific acquisition amount. So we won't, in the future, need that money. It should be up there when we have town meeting consider these.
There may still be an accounting discussion about some of those funds that were in fact included in the town warrant, but that's not an issue for tonight.
I just want to say, it's really, I used to be on the commission in the 70s to the 90s, and for a while we had 20,000 a year, and then it went away. And it's so great to see this taken for granted now that it's recurring, and, it's a kind of obligation to ourselves.
Any questions or comments from the public? Thank you, and I think you do an encore.
There we go. Come right back up.
What's your
On a comprehensive trails plan.
So again, yep, so the comprehensive trails plan is a proposal for a project for $50,000, essentially to create a document, a working document that planning, conservation, the Recreation Commission, the Weir River Estuary Park Committee, the Open Space Committee, that folks can draw on to help guide our open space and recreation planning for the future. It's meant to provide concrete steps and recommendations for whether it's a trail system, a level of service of trails, whether we're talking about, a footpath or a sidewalk level trail, to what degree are certain properties more accessible than others, and how do we address that for folks. So it's really meant to be kind of the map for us to follow to help prioritize some of these decisions as we go forward. The $50,000, it comes from two conversations that I had, one with the Horsley Witten Group and one with representatives from Alta Planning, who's a national trails planning piece, and Horsley Witten is a little bit more local. And $50,000 is that sort of baseline plan that kind of gets you the mechanics of evaluating the inventory of what you have, understanding what your possibilities are, and then starting to flesh out some of the capital costs to actually pursue some of the next steps. The nice thing about a trails plan, it kind of does two things. One, again, like as I said before, it starts to implement the vision of the master plan, of the open space plan, of the Weir River Estuary Park bike plan. It really starts to bring all of these things together in a very tangible way. In fact, it is the action step that's identified in a number of those plans. So we're really just trying to carry forward what the great people who have done all the work ahead of us have put into place. Once this type of plan is in place, it also allows us to start applying for money, looking for other sources of funding outside of the town to implement projects. And I Safe Routes to Schools always becomes my sort of buzz program, but there's others out there that we can look toward, that in order to receive funding, they're going to want to know, has this particular stretch of trail been planned for? Is it part of a comprehensive vision? And so this will allow us to pursue some of those projects. And so, again, that's really the goal here, and I hope folks find that valuable. We certainly have the support of the Rec Commission, Planning Board, Open Space Acquisition Committee, the Conservation Commission, the Estuary Park Committee. So it's been a really great effort so far. And I think, moving forward, if it were to be funded, we would certainly have a real collaborative effort working with whatever consultant we're ultimately hired to make this something that everybody's got some input into.
Could you give us perhaps an eagle's eye view of what the vision is for?
Sure, I can at least show you some of the opportunities. Let me grab a map real quick. So this is very, very much a broad view, and if anybody at home wants to see this, you can certainly come to the conservation office, or I can email a copy out to folks.
I suspect that our.
I don't know where the camera is.
Camera-
I'm not sure where, we can,
Is it in one of those bubbles, or?
you can get a shot. There's one behind you as well.
Cameraman can actually zoom in on that. so.
Yep,
Okay.
all right.
My eyes can't zoom in.
Yeah, and what you want to look here, what you want to look for here is just really, really general colors. So for here, current open space properties are in green. The idea here, and the goals of the master plan and the open space plan say, where can we start to link these things up? So one of the opportunities, that we had talked about, for example, in the south part of Hingham with 173 Whiting Street, was the idea of some open space here, linking up to more here, coming over toward the pond here, and then ultimately to Wampatuck. So creating a South Hingham trail that would connect pieces here, allowing folks as they go through this to connect to schools. So getting folks into whether it's Notre Dame or the middle school or back up to the high school, being able to say, where can we draw people from the neighborhoods through open space to a destination? How can we take folks and pull them, if you're at World's End, are there opportunities to kind of come through some of the wherever estuary bike piece here, get down to East Elementary School, get back over to downtown, and do it in a way that is, it could be multimodal, it could be partially sidewalks, partially trails. How do we connect up all of those great sort of resources so folks could hop on a bike and have a safe experience with their families? Or easily, start over here and wind up at Wampatuck. And so it's really a matter of how do we start to make those connections defined? How do we get into, if there's a field facility here and somebody's got, a game going on this end and, somebody to pick up at a school down the road, how can they get between them? So that's really the idea. We haven't fleshed out exact parcels or any of that kind of stuff yet, and that's really the need for the study, is to say, okay, point to point, what do we target and where should we be talking to property owners to work with them to say, how can we make this happen?
Is there a way for the citizens of Hingham to sort of weigh in on what they'd like to see?
Absolutely. So if this were to go forward, there would be a pretty significant public engagement process. I think my goal would be to do it both at the neighborhood level, so to, if we're talking about a portion of South Hingham, to really get to talk to the folks there and say, what exactly are your needs? What do you wish you had, and how can we make that happen? But again, the purpose of this is to help people connect to the resources in their community. It's certainly not something that's an academic exercise of saying, well, wouldn't it be nice to make a little line from here to here? How will it be used? I mean, the ultimate goal here is the end user, and it's the residents of Hingham that we really want to serve, and then connecting it to other communities where folks are, kind of hanging around in Hull. How could they easily, bike in and go to lunch at Stars? How would that work? So without going through a roundabout or something else. So how can we make that work?
Does the plan include any information on the locations of the open space parcels and some signage at the entry? A lot of these lesser-known parcels are known by people who live near them, but to access them, it isn't always clear. If you were going to drive to one of these parcels, where do you park? Or how do you get to like 0 Scotland Street, which very few people know where it is? I mean, it's obviously addressed, but I mean, few people have gone there, they might not know.
Yep, and I think this is a really great opportunity to build on 2 documents that I think have some of that information in them, but to help make it more accessible to folks. So one, the open space plan does do some of that in terms of the property inventories, and also the Hingham Land Conservation Trust map also has a lot of information on what types of trails are available at each place. The idea here would be, let's link them together in an interactive document that folks can say, I want this kind of experience. If I want to look for some moderate trails to be able to go on about this much, length, where can I go? And this would sort of provide us the framework to ultimately meet that goal. So it will do some of that. It will most likely draw on some work that's really already been done and make it a little bit more accessible.
Will this be on the website?
This can be on the website, yeah.
Abby, I'm going next.
You should go there.
I want to, can you give us a timeline, if this were to get funded? See, like mines. What kind of a timeline? I mean, because it sounds like boggles the mind as to how much work goes into that. So what would you sort of suggest that we would see?
My goal would be 12 to 16 months.
Okay.
Yep.
And do we have any other communities that are, that we know of that have done a similar?
There are some, oh shoot, and now I'm starting to blank on
That's all
all
right.
the different communities. I know I provided a list originally. I know that they're, nearby, I believe Norwell has some specific trails that they've put into place. So there's conservation officers and stuff around that have actually done some of this work that I can certainly work with and say, how can we help connect into folks, directly adjacent. And for some reason, I'm blanking on the name of the community where our Horsley Witten contact had done the plan, but that's another opportunity there. So
Great.
there are some, and I can post those towns on the website as well for folks to take a look at.
Thank you.
A couple of suggestions.
That's
Probably
fine.
thought of.
I had a timeline question mostly, it's
Oh.
fine.
Is the 50,000 going to be enough to do the whole town?
I think the 50,000 will be enough to do the bird's eye view of the whole town. When it gets into, the thing that I think the $50,000 will cover less of is exact cost for particular trail segment estimates. What it will do is say this level of trail should be in this range. So if we wanted to say you're going to have a crushed stone path that's 10 feet wide, and generally speaking, it costs this much per foot to build. And so that way we can say if we want this level of service, we know we need to be planning for a certain level of cost as we go into the actual design of that particular stretch.
So really, building on Vicky's question, this is really almost a plan for a plan, an outline with
What
a
it-
general. Okay.
Sort of, yeah. What it does is it gives a prioritized, it gives the priority levels of what to go for first. So what the idea here is, given the sort of, typically these plans are done in sort of a near-term, mid-term, long-term view. And so what it will say is, near-term, in the next 2 years, open space, CPC, other groups should be targeting these properties to connect to these existing facilities in this way. And then, kind of take us from there. The longer term stuff, if it's something, for example, getting some kind of path past, Broad Cove and 3A there, that's a longer term.
I was going to say 3A would be a good.
Right, yeah.
Abby, I just want to add, because you did give us that information and examples of towns that have done this. Needham, Massachusetts, Sturbridge, Mass, Winthrop, Mass, and then a few other states. But I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No,
It's
oh,
right
you're
here in
fine.
front of us. Thank you.
What I was trying to say was, one resource you probably would have thought about is the Safe Routes to Schools program. Because it's very frustrating, the opportunities that haven't been seized upon, like from Bradley Woods to Foster School. You don't need to bus there, except you do. And I was doing some research a while ago, and there are some programs that have very peculiar requirements. There's one funding program that's for recreational trails only, no practical purpose is intended. And there's one that's for actual transportation. And it sounds like a joke, except the two funding agencies have different purposes. One's gas tax and one's something else. And the other is, I would have thought that maybe the commission and volunteers could have done it without a consultant, but a consultant can pull things together. And I wonder, you're going to have a smaller working group, some commissioners, some other people, to bridge both the local knowledge and the generation of ideas.
Absolutely. So the idea that there would be a working group, and again, the reason, there's two reasons for the consultant. One, I certainly believe there's a lot of expertise in-house, but there's a lot of other competing work that has to be done. And so I think if we look for all staff time to do this, it could be 5 years out, quite frankly, given the current staffing levels. But I also think that those consultants bring in fresh ideas and give a perspective that I think is really valuable and adds to staff expertise. So I think the combination of that working group staff and the consultant could be really valuable for the town.
Because sometimes the immediate response can be discouraging. Scott and I have been working on a proposal, to try to get a crossing between Great Esker and Bear Cove Park. And we met with the Bear Cove Park Committee. The chair was very skeptical. Some members were very enthusiastic. Talked to Jim Clark, the Weymouth town planner. He was against it. Talked to Mr. Doyle, the recreation supervisor, who was totally for it. So you can't stop at the first person you talk to.
Right, right.
And anyway, good luck with it.
Any further questions from the committee or from members of the public?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we come to the barn, Phase 3. Mark? No, I don't. No. I'm waiting.
Randomly going to the town right now, so
Oh, I got it.
Oh, Mark, that's a great brochure. I've already got that at home.
Oh, okay.
It's really good.
That's all I'm saying tonight. Not even talking, just sneezing.
Very creative.
I'm okay.
We can't hear.
No.
Some people gonna put some more down.
I've seen this already. Great job. Where's Clark? That's how you use it.
You stop by the store in the square?
I was thinking about this window opportunity.
I had no dinner. I ran to the boat. I really had to go to Sandy Mark to death. All I ate was noontime. I was embarrassed.
Is water still freezing?
I mean, there were children.
Is this your presentation?
It is, but everyone has it in their folder, so.
No, the town computer's not working. It was misconfigured, so I'm just volunteering mine and waiting for the correct cable to set it up for everybody, not
Oh, wow.
just mine later, so I'm just trying to get it set up as quick as I can for you, but this isn't what I do for a living.
You can do it out there.
Doesn't bother me to start.
No,
Why don't you go ahead?
Okay, sure.
You need the teleprompter?
No. Good evening, thank you for having me. I'm Mark Thorell. I'm presenting on behalf of the Recreation Commission, Phase 3 of the barn project. So if I may, I believe everyone has in their folder a 5-page packet. If I may start at page 1 and just quickly recap Phase 1 and 2. So Phase 1, the CPC at the April 2011 town meeting approved $25,000 to study, to conduct a feasibility study on the barn located behind Town Hall. Based off of those results, at the April 2012 town meeting, the town appropriated $252,000 to shore up the infrastructure of the barn, to make sure that a town-owned historic building will last another 100 years into the future. Why we're here tonight is for Phase 3, which the Rec Commission has nicknamed Rebirth of the Historic Cordage Factory. So what we're trying to accomplish with Phase 3 is to renovate the first floor of the barn so that we could run programs out of the first floor. We first came to the CPC with a total project cost of renovating the first floor of $576,000. And trying to be realistic and work within everyone's budget, we kind of came back with a two-pronged approach of a Phase A and a Phase B. And if we could flip to page 2, which kind of outlines Phase A and Phase B. So the work of Phase A would include site permitting, site and utility infrastructure work, electrical services, sewer connection, accessible entries, and mechanical pads, building insulation and air sealing. And the most important part about the end of Phase A would result in finished bathrooms. And what we're hoping is to ask for the town capital $75,000, and the CPC $175,000, for a total price tag of Phase A of $250,000. The proposed scope of work for Phase B would include finishing the interior construction, fire suppression systems, and finished landscape, including a parking lot. That funding request is we would be hoping to be awarded $100,000 from the town capital funds and $250,000 from CPC, for a total of $350,000. Working with Roger Fernandez, you'll notice that if it was a one-year approach, it would be $576,000, but splitting it up into 2 separate years, we're not quite being as efficient as a one-year project, so that's why it creeped up to the even $600,000. Page 3 is a diagram of what we're hoping to accomplish with the renovated first floor. Simple, open concept design, which would not preclude any future use the town may have for the building. The Rec Commission is very confident that we can keep the building humming with activity throughout there, but we know that there's a lot of variables out there between Town Hall and other buildings in town. But this type of design would not preclude any future use that town may wish to explore. And as you can see from the diagram, very large, multi-purpose room, just open concept, with a small waiting room so that you could have kids or adults or seniors waiting for the activity to get over and a new activity come in, and then also men's and women's bathroom. Flipping to page 4. Just a simple diagram of showing that there is a basement and an attic in the barn, but trying to keep the project within budget and keep it reality. Just talking about the first floor, really trying to renovate into the second floor. Certainly we could take a look at it in the future, but it's kind of a budget buster to include the second floor. And then the 5th and final page. So to recap, Phase 3 is about renovating open concept of the first floor. And if I could just talk a little bit about where the barn sits, right behind Town Hall at the Cronin Field complex, and what I like to refer to as the most diversified recreational amenity in Hingham. Why do I call it that? That is because there's the largest playground in Hingham, so it's serving 0 to 5 population. You also have tennis courts, a hockey rink, inline hockey rink, basketball courts, a volleyball court, a soccer field, a little league field, and a Major League Baseball diamond. So really covers vast array of recreational amenities. And with the exception of having bathrooms located in the basement of Town Hall, which really doesn't help if someone's using the tennis courts or if a toddler's at the playground. There are no indoor bathroom amenities. So even at the end of just Phase A, having finished bathrooms would be quite an improvement to the Cronin Field complex area to be able to have people be able to utilize finished bathrooms. If I could quickly mention the scope of operations, I think sometimes people who aren't familiar with the rec department sometimes think of the rec as maybe just a fitness room at town hall. So trying to make everyone aware of the broad reach that we have. We currently offer over 200 self-funded programs a year. I passed out our fall-winter program, and it kind of just gives a snapshot of a two-season, of what we offer within 2 seasons. Between our fitness room and our fitness classes, we have well over 1,000 different fitness participants. Last summer, we were just shy of enrollment of 1,600 into our summer program. So when you take a look at the usage of the barn, there's no doubt about it that we could make that building self-sufficient and make it very busy with activity. I gave a quick example of what types of activities we could plug in over at a multi-purpose room. From June to August, we do a solid 10 weeks of our summer program. We even have before camp and after camp. So from 7:30 in the morning to 5 p.m. at night, we would certainly use the room for arts and crafts. The room would be so big I could almost envision a divider creating 2 smaller rooms. But that being said, you could make it a game room. You could offer team building activities in there. And it's important to have a variety of indoor spaces here, because at any given time we have over 300 children here. So if it's raining or a thunderstorm, it's definitely a need to be cycling inclement weather, having the kids inside, but even in the extreme heat, cycling the kids in and out of air-conditioned areas. During the school year, fitness classes such as yoga, bar, cardio pump, boot camp classes could utilize a large multi-purpose room. Kids classes such as little kicker soccer for 2 to 4-year-olds, mini sports, martial arts classes, art classes could utilize a room such as that. Adult classes such as CPR, dog training, ballroom dancing, and other art classes would certainly be considered. And I also talked to Barbara Farnsworth of Elder Services, and they also have a desperate need for more space, and she certainly would be interested in doing some programming over there. And we're more than open to opening the doors to other town departments, especially Elder Services. She mentioned a wide variety of lifelong learning programs, Tai Chi, and a variety of fitness classes. So there's no question in my mind that we can keep that building humming with activity and be a great benefit to the town of Hingham.
Mark, can you ask just how big is this room? Because there's no dimensions on it.
We envisioned the room itself being about 1,400 square feet.
And the occupancy rate?
Oh, that's right. The occupancy rate between the waiting room and the activity room, if you needed it to be, could be well over 100 people. So, I mean, our biggest activity that we have currently is our summer program, upwards of 60 kids, so we're well within that limits. But if Elder Services had a need for a large meeting, it certainly could occupy upwards of 100 people.
But I mean, it seems like if there's going to be 1,000 different uses, that means a lot of stuff moving in and out. It doesn't appear there's any first floor storage on this.
Most of the programs that I mentioned don't involve too much storage. Some of those fitness classes, you certainly would need a little bit. We could certainly work in a small closet to storage. This design is an example and is pretty spot on, but we can make some minor modifications to it.
I mean, can storage, I know we've talked about the the ADA compliance with the basement or the second floor, but can the basement or second floor be used for storage,
That's
not for
correct.
people?
It absolutely could be used as
I
storage
mean,
as
just like if
well,
you're gonna
yeah.
lift machines up and down bicycles or something.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
not gonna do that.
Yeah, we would still envision our equipment such as our spin program still being in one classroom, such as in the basement at Town Hall, with that, because of that it's limited in terms of that space. So if we're having that many different activities, we couldn't cycle in and out, spin
Right.
bikes, that sort of thing.
I just had a question about the likelihood of the 75,000 in town capital, and then what happens if you don't get that? What does the project look like?
Well, we're hopeful. We met with Town Capital. They seem fairly positive about the project. Their question to us was, what if you don't get the 175?
Okay.
So,
All right, so it's a kind of a standoff.
I know we talked before about reaching forward, and this feels like reaching forward. Like, in other words, to finish the project, you can't do it in 1 year. And weren't we saying sometimes that we don't like to sort of, it seems like, if you're gonna spend $250,000 to get 2 bathrooms, if that was the end of the project, those are expensive bathrooms. So, I mean, are we concerned at all that in order to really do the project, you have to be committing almost 2 years? And that means we're committing $175,000 in the future, or $250,000 in the future in the next cycle. So we're, to really finish it, and I'm not sure that's something that we're committed to.
I thought in the stabilization program for this project that wasn't it assumed that we would probably have to, we'd stabilize the perimeter of the envelope of the building? Wasn't it an assumption then that to do the interior program, we would reach forward?
I wasn't aware of that.
Was it, no?
No,
No,
reach
no.
forward means actually commit in advance, which we're not doing.
No, they'd apply in the future, I guess
Yeah.
that's the better way to say it.
But you're not gonna finish it, you can't really have usable space unless you do the second phase.
Phase 1 and Phase 2 were actually historic preservation projects. This has now changed to a recreation project with the with the amendment of the CPA.
Okay.
I don't think we're really talking about a reach forward, which we only did with, or proposed to do with respect to the, a unified land purchase. I'm seeing this as a discrete project this year that stands on itself, it stands alone.
But I mean, all it is bathrooms.
Well, it's bathrooms plus the first floor space.
Space.
But it's not complete.
It's basically the whole
Yeah, I mean,
first
can you
floor.
run a program, after the 250,000 with Phase A, can you start putting programs in there?
no.
Okay, that's what I thought, you can't do
What's,
that.
can't.
what's
No.
the difference? What else do you have to do?
It wouldn't be up to code compliant with all the building codes.
Okay.
'Cause when you
Would have
said-
no heat.
Yeah, and there's no
Yeah.
fire suppression at that point, so you can't put people in a building
But
without fire.
It could be finished to a point where you at least have the finished bathrooms and allowing the public to use, but you are right, it wouldn't be all finished the first floor.
So there would need to be a Phase 4.
Phase
Phase 3A.
Phase
Phase
3A.
3A.
Or we could consider it all at once.
Right, so either you do it all at once and then you have the finished product, or if you break it in half, then to me that feels almost reaching forward, because you're saying, next year, we are going to have to give you $250,000 to make this usable space. Because otherwise, it's not usable after this infusion of 175,000, other than bathrooms.
Is there a way to reconfigure the phasing, the budgeting requested in the phases and the scope included in the phases to go with a larger Phase A and a smaller Phase B, which would give you a occupiable building?
Well, I wouldn't argue with the committee if you guys wanted
That's
to
right.
change it to the full 576.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, 'cause to me, it seems like it's gotta be all or nothing, because otherwise, if we don't have any money next year or some huge good thing comes along, well, now we've already kind of put 250,000 aside, because otherwise the building, we've just wasted, not wasted, but we've bought really expensive bathrooms.
I don't think it has to be considered all or nothing, given the way that we've broken it up. It will have finished bathrooms. I know those are expensive bathrooms, but at the same time, it's a public project. and the town is invested in it. So even if CPC didn't have the funds, I would certainly hope that, given the amount of money that CPC has put into the barn, that the town capital would certainly consider a couple $100,000 to finish off a project where the CPC carried so far.
I mean, I would ask Irma, since you're here, because we have met with the town administrator and we've met with capital outlay, and all seemed very positive about wanting to see this building get funded. You know, it was all who's doing what. And CPC wants to see capital outlay do some funding, and capital outlay wants to see CPC. Quite honestly, recreation doesn't really care who wants to fund the lawn, the lion's share, and certainly recreation may be able to fundraise some of its own money, so I guess.
We've not discussed it at all yet.
Right.
But
So,
you-
I mean, if you look at the 2 years, then are you really asking for 375? I mean,
CPC is what you're saying.
CPC 375, because I know we had down here 5-something, but isn't it 375 based on what's here?
And
Correct.
you're
Yes.
looking 175 from the town.
And it would actually be less if you were doing it
Correct.
in 1 year.
So ask for 175 from capital outlay and 375 from CPC,
Yeah.
and then you have the project, right?
Have you all talked with the town administrator to see if he has any other creative solutions?
We've talked
We've
with
talked
him.
with him, and he seemed very positive about the project and stood behind it. We didn't really seem the need to come up with creative solutions other than breaking it up into
And
the
the
2
two
years that we did.
Well, I mean, if you look here, it's 175 of town capital. If we were to, let's say, consider this at once, it would be then 401,000 of CPC funds in one slug.
Why 400?
Well, it's 576 based on a 1 year.
Well, yeah, but just looking at these numbers,
But isn't
370.
it 4 1/4? Isn't it 425?
Yeah.
It's 175 plus 250, which is 425.
Oh, okay, that's my bad math skills.
That's all right.
Well, that's with the 2-year phase. I mean, it's cheaper, as Mark
Cheaper
said, if we did it in 1
one.
year.
Absolutely.
So if that would be 175 from the town and
400.
400 from the
We'll round it to
CPC.
400 and we'll raise the rest.
Well, if the CPC were to consider 400,000 this year for this project, that would mean, unless the capital, town capital was coming up with 175, you're not getting the project done for more than a year.
Exactly.
And the town capital might not have, I mean, there might not be 175,000 of town capital available this year
But now you're counting on 2 years for going to the well,
for CPC.
and for the town.
Well, we are, but I mean, there may not be 175,000 of town capital right now.
And there might not be 250 CPC next year.
You're right.
Right.
The other constraint on going in 2 phases is there are the operational and the maintenance costs to keep a semi-finished building intact. It's one thing to keep an exterior envelope of a barn intact, it's another thing to keep an interior intact. So that's 24 months of maintenance at least versus 12. And I don't know what those costs are and how that factors into this planning and who pays for that.
Right.
Yeah, that's right too, because yeah, like you say, yeah, every year is who's gonna maintain this and who's gonna pay for the heat? How's it all gonna get paid for?
We would self-fund it. We have a track record of being able to, we don't pay for the space here at Town Hall, but we could self-fund the building, there's no question about it.
But that's a good point in the maintenance piece of taking care of something that isn't up to code. I mean, the bathrooms, we were prepared
For sure.
to take care of, but if we were able to do this in one funding period, recreation would make the commitment to maintain the building.
Could all the infrastructure be put in and the program space be reduced? The large room be, let's say you build 50% of the program space, but you do all the infrastructure-related space now, so then the building could be occupied, it could be up to code, and then it could be used, but only half the building could be used this year, and then you'd finish the other half of the program space next year.
That's interesting. That's an interesting
And then you could run the
thought.
building, then you could open
Yeah.
it.
But I mean,
The
isn't
larger costs were the heating, the fire, all of those costs.
That's
which
right.
That's why we broke it up into the bathrooms and into the space.
Right.
Because of exactly that reason. I mean, the minute you get into putting in heat systems and fire and all of that, you're doing the whole room. So it isn't the build out of the room is, I mean, basically, once they get those things in, the least expensive piece
It's
of
probably
it.
just putting flooring down.
Exactly,
Flooring
and
and
walls.
walls.
Well, that's where I was
Walls.
going with
But
that.
that's
This
why we were
year's-
doing the bathroom separately, because it was a way to get something opened and
But you-
usable.
But you'd still have to do the heat and the fire protection to do the bathrooms, wouldn't you?
Not for the whole part of the building. I don't know how they
But
would
for the half the
somehow.
building, right.
Yeah, I don't know how, but he
That's
did.
why I was thinking maybe you'd ask for more in the first phase, put the heating and the infrastructure in the first phase, and then have the second phase as a smaller phase.
I
I
don't
don't
know
know.
a
I
reason
mean,
why you
it's-
couldn't do it that way.
But you have to have the heat to open the bathrooms in the winter?
To get an occupancy permit,
You would
don't you
not-
need all that?
Yeah.
I would have to talk with Roger
Roger.
to see what he would think, but from talking with him, I think that this was like the best that we could do to try to,
But if
I tried my best to have a Phase A where you could have
something open.
programs running out of it, and I just don't think unless you did ask for substantial more money, but in that budget of the 250, we weren't gonna be able to get usage of the building, but if certainly if you increase the budget, I'm sure there's things that you could do.
Well, I mean, do we need to think about, I mean, there isn't a request for all of this right now, but I mean, it's our prerogative as a committee to consider projects in their entirety, right?
Well, the original request was for the full amount,
Right.
and.
And then is this more pressing than other things that we may have on our plate? I guess we have to think about that as a
Yeah.
committee.
That
This
would
this is the
repre-
only recreation application, right?
Well, the
On
trails.
the heading of it.
The trails.
Trails considered
Trails.
recreation.
And
Bathing
open space and
And the
recreation are
bathing
kind of in the
beach.
same, well,
Well, there are for the budget, but isn't this recreation now the fourth tier of what the CPA?
Doesn't have its own,
it doesn't have its own leg of the tripod.
Which is not.
It's,
no, it's part of the open space
no,
one.
it doesn't get
Oh,
a
okay.
separate reserve, for example.
Okay.
It's, you know, it's within the open space
Open
reserve.
space.
Roger has looked over this from A to Z, I take it. And did he have any creative ideas for some different form of phasing?
I've talked with him about it, and I said, is there any way that we could, at the end of Phase A, have an activity room done? And he's like, not if we're in that budget of the 250 range, and trying to work within everyone's budget. I was thinking that we needed to be in that ballpark.
How much more would it take to go beyond the 250 to get, as everyone's talking, a half the activity room? So you'd have your bathrooms, and you'd have an activity room, which I know from all the programs you have would be busy
Yeah, yeah.
continually. And that would provide the funding, but also provide use.
Sure, I could
Continuous
certainly
use.
ask Roger and get back to the committee.
Does that diminish is it less compelling? You have a room, like, so, year two, so you have this half a room. I don't know what maybe you use it for something, but so we feel like, all right, we funded you something more than bathrooms. So we didn't fund $250,000 bathrooms, or whatever it is.
Sounds like the Air Force or
That's right.
the Defense
Toilet seat.
Department.
Right, so we funded you a really nice half a room and not just a bathroom, but doesn't that make it harder to fund the rest of the room?
To me, it just feels like this is more all or nothing. It really, otherwise, it feels like a reach forward. You're building something that's not usable, and it's only usable
After the second year.
after the second year, so it doesn't stand alone. And I thought that's one of our criteria. It's got to
How long-
stand alone.
How long would the construction take?
It would be within a year. I'm not sure the
Right.
exact timeframe, though.
Roger gave
If
us
we-
the
if we-
indication that.
If we didn't spend the money this year and just kept it in the bank, and you came back to us next year, would we then be saving the town money? Because we could then do it all in one project? Or do you think?
I'd certainly ask Roger's opinion, but I imagine so.
Does it hurt the building to leave it for a year and do nothing?
No, no.
And the other subject I wanted to ask is, I know there has been some discussion about some major changes to town hall.
Right.
Does that play into this project at all, or have you had any
Makes
input
this
from-
project all the more important.
Yeah.
It does.
Yes.
Why?
Okay.
It does.
Because if there's talk of recreation moving out of this building, but all summer programs would still be at Town Hall, as would the gym. So the barn, the use of the barn and the necessity for it becomes all that more important. And that's what the feeling has been, that we've heard, at least back from both town administrator and capital outlay. I mean, again, nobody made promises, but people certainly were very favorable on seeing the barn as a completed project.
I mean, it's still anticipated the skating rink, Cronin Field, all the other field complex would not go away, right?
Nothing.
Right, right.
So then that's still co-located in the center of town.
Right.
Exactly, yeah.
And seniors are not going to go away, and they're the ones who need a lot more space.
Yeah, but are seniors really gonna
Yes.
move from one?
Oh, it's
There's
massive.
parking. Yeah,
Some of
they'll-
the-
Well, again, I mean, I'm not disputing use of it. I
No.
just feel, it feels reach forward to me. It feels if you give the money, the way this is presented, you don't have a usable thing, and you're committing money, you're not, it doesn't stand alone, and it's not usable at the end of this funding cycle. And I thought that's something that we were avoiding.
Well,
So-
we're in it for the long haul, so I'm sure putting the money aside, and if we're able to do it in one shot, 2 years down the road, it accomplishes the same thing, but just not this year. I'm sure the rec commission would be way more than thrilled with that.
I mean, you're suggesting to reserve this amount, to not spend it?
I'm saying don't spend
But appropriate.
$175,000.
So
Appropriate.
put it
But
appropriate to the
appropriate?
historic reserve. Otherwise, it
No, we
goes
don't,
into the
until we make a recommendation to town meeting, nothing gets appropriated.
No, we could make a recommendation that an amount that we're comfortable with gets sent to the historic reserve. If we don't approve this project next year, then that
Why
money's sitting in the historic
It's
It's
reserve.
not historic,
No.
this is.
I'm sorry, the open
Recreation.
space reserve,
Open
sorry,
space,
the open
right.
space reserve.
There's, well, assuming we buy a piece of open space land this year, there's not gonna be anything in the reserve.
Right.
We would simply not spend the money with the idea that this would come back to us next year for additional funds for a project that could be done all at one time.
Why do we think we'd have the
Why?
money next year? Because we didn't spend it this year?
Well, it would just be up for consideration again, there might,
At least
At a
all-
bigger amount.
Well,
we're gonna pay it either way.
we would have set aside $175,000 with at least the thought that this is a worthwhile project that makes sense to do all at once.
Or
I
is
think we're
there a
saying
way
the
to
same
sharpen pencils and do it this year, if the money is there, as we go through the process, working with capital outlay to see if their money may be there, because it's not that much more.
Well,
There
and
may
then-
be a possibility that this could happen this
Well,
year.
would an option be to do an enabling project where all of the design and the engineering would be completely done? You'd have the hard costs, you'd have all the permitting, so it would be a construction-ready project that could happen either A, this year if the funding was raised, or B, could be put off till next year if the funding wasn't raised. But as soon as you got the money, you could start, rather than if we reserve
I
it
feel like we're
one
getting
more
even less
year,
for our money
we
then.
still
See,
have to.
that's right.
Are
See,
you
the
getting
reason,
less?
no, the reason we didn't do that,
You didn't?
just,
Okay.
the reason we didn't do that was because the committee had talked about having something open, so that's why we got to opening bathrooms.
Okay.
Even though they weren't.
The public will be
Is
very
to have the
pleased to have those bathrooms. They
Right,
won't look
we
at
were
it as if
doing
we
that-
did nothing.
that
I
and the
understand, I
bathrooms.
understand.
So
That was
that's
our
why
work.
the bathrooms.
I was
Yeah,
just
got
thinking
thrown
about
in,
it, too.
exactly.
You know what, there are bathrooms in town hall too, so, I
But
mean,
they're
it's
not
not.
on the weekends.
But they're not
No, they're
always
not.
open.
Well, maybe they could, maybe we could take some of this money and hire someone to open the bathrooms
don't think
and
so.
not spend
Open town hall.
$250,000 for two
But to
bathrooms.
do the construction, to just get the bathrooms, you still have to go through all of the design and
Right, well, that's
enabling.
what we were getting.
And so if you design it for part of the building and not the full building, you're gonna end up
Right.
doing an addendum on the design. I just thought it might be more, and then also you'd have to, if you didn't authorize it next year, until next year, then it would not be ready even a year from now to go ahead, so it's a
so
two-year
amorphous to
minimum to
me.
getting the thing
Right.
open, and it's way down the
Well,
road.
I'm just wondering, in terms
Yeah.
of time,
Anyway.
but it doesn't sound like this thing is like ready to hit the boards in terms of being, right, pull the plug as soon as the money hits. If we shouldn't be replanning it at this late in the game.
I
I
think in any
think,
case, there's a value to momentum, and getting started builds support for the second phase, and it feels good in a proper sense, that we're doing something about it. Having it sit for another year while the money's sat there even if there wasn't deterioration just from time, this seems like a lost opportunity.
Well, but again, I think we're replanning something at the 23rd hour here.
Yeah, we've now doubled the time allotted for
Okay.
this
Yeah.
discussion,
Yeah.
and I do think we are doing a lot of replanning. And I think before next week, if there is some,
Okay.
completely fleshed out alternative that should come before us for our consideration, that we'd be happy to take a look at.
But when this was approved last year under the historic preservation funding, wasn't there a thought of what this building would be used for? I mean, I agree with what Kathleen's saying, but it almost seems like we're already in a phase of process. This is
No,
now phase 3. Were you planning to just restore this building and just have it
Well,
be a
that,
historic
it was
building?
presented just to
So
restore
there's
the
no
building.
talk about what the use of the building would
Could
be?
be-
That's
for
right.
many
The-
things.
The use was left wide open.
Okay.
The use was left wide open because Recreation had taken the lead on this, but we had also understood that perhaps
Some other
the
use.
town would want some other use. But the use was left wide open. Basically, it was a very historic structure, owned by the town. We wanted to see it preserved, and that's been accomplished.
Yeah.
I mean, the recreation use that's proposed, I think, is great, but I do think we want to do it in the most reasonable way we can.
If we had if we considered next week 400,000 for the whole project, well, we should think about that in the context of other projects that may need to move forward this year or may not. That's one thing. The other is I guess my discomfort with that, I agree with what is being suggested, that Kathleen suggests that, well, we just get these 2 bathrooms. Then we're sort of kind of on the hook for the other
Right.
piece, but I don't know that if the 175,000 isn't available for town capital, then we've appropriated 400,000 and we got nothing until the town comes up with the rest of the money. That doesn't feel good to anybody.
Right.
I think in the context of the larger town hall project, this becomes very important.
Okay.
And whether there's another creative way to take care of the money, I don't know.
Okay.
But hearing the discussion, I agree with Kathleen, but the bathrooms are needed more than you know.
Right, but I mean, that could be done by building bathrooms.
Can you even open the
know.
bathrooms without the heat?
Yeah, Roger promised that we could open the bathrooms. We got all approval from everybody that the bathrooms could be open. Now, how that heat was going to be there, don't ask me, but they said
They see it.
absolutely, that they were going to be able to open the bathrooms.
Maybe go back to Roger and ask, take a look at it one more time. But then maybe we can have a chat with the town administrator.
Good. Done.
And any further chance for input from capital outlay? for,
Now, when are they making their final decision? I should know, but I'm drawing a blank.
I can find out when their
Yeah.
decision
It was
process
after the
is.
15th, we
mean,
know that.
For input with them coming up with 176 rather than,
Yeah.
I can look into that too.
Yeah, if we did 400, would they do 176
I'll throw it
at
out
the
to
same
them.
time? I mean,
okay, shall we
Okay, move
suspend the
on.
discussion at this point? Unless there are further comments or
Thanks.
Thank you.
questions
Thank
from
you,
the
Mark.
public?
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
Thanks.
And, you know, Mr. Case,
Town hall, when our office was in that barn for 2 years, no electric heat. One strip of electric heat, that's what they need. So it's not difficult to do that.
and is that code compliant that we can do, though? I mean,
I
I don't
actually
know.
don't
Yes.
even think you need heated bathrooms. I think the bathrooms at the high school turf field don't have heat in them, so I'm pretty sure you don't even need it.
well, I'm sure the summertime's not a problem,
Yeah.
Right.
Today might be.
Yeah.
but today would be, yeah.
Frozen
Well, the
pipes.
pipes are gonna freeze anyway.
Right.
Yeah, they would need to be winterized in the
Right.
winter, but,
Yeah.
Put 400 into this thing.
thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
And our next item is the Constitution Firehouse sign. I know the chief Duff has been busy lately with
His own budget.
his own budget
Yeah.
and other matters. I know it was his intention to submit a revised proposal with respect to the removal, storage, and preservation of the firehouse sign, but we just haven't seen it yet. We may see it before next week. I don't believe there's anyone here tonight to address the Constitution Firehouse sign proposal.
And we were looking, was Roger looking for three weren't we talking about the need to have multiple cost proposals, at least in the concept, so otherwise we have no idea what one person's price, maybe half of someone else's, or twice someone
Well,
else's?
having
or-
done the first one, we did go out with an RFP, and there are very limited resources out there.
To create the sign, or
Yes,
preserve the
or
sign.
preserve the sign. What we got was a lot of responses from people who make the flat sign, like for gas stations, and got a lot of those, and when they came in and looked, it was like, gee, we'd really like to try this, and we went, that's nice, thank you so much.
Not interested, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, move right along.
Do we have any idea what that number is? I mean, any,
You know,
do we think it's 10,000 or 80,000?
No,
We have no idea.
it was my understanding that basically what the chief would look for this year would be funding to take the sign down and put it in a safe atmosphere where it would be preserved. And then, once that was done, the preservation costs could, restoration costs could be
Next
addressed
year?
in the future.
That doesn't
But-
seem that costly to me, but I'm not a,
It wouldn't be.
okay.
I think we're talking about less than $15,000.
And
But
then
again, I'm
we're
just gonna
also
chime
waiting.
in. Isn't it late in the game that we don't have a solid proposal and
Well,
we're
and I
supposed to
don't-
vote next week? To me, it's like, this isn't ready for prime time. If we can't discuss it and vote on it next week, I don't understand why we're even talking about it. I mean, that's just my opinion.
One of the thoughts that I had was is that there was a lot of, it's fair, relative to the process, it's very fair. But it seems to me on this particular application that there's a lot of complexity of, going through and defining what exactly is eligible under preservation and restoration and how much that costs is not the easiest thing to define a number on. I'd almost suggest we do a placeholder. It's probably 15,000.
But, I mean, to Kathleen's point, aren't you supposed to have this ready before now?
Yeah, I mean, this is,
Probably.
this is like, to me, I don't understand why we're even doing this, because people are supposed to be, it's supposed to be ready to, so we can understand and vote, and we don't even understand the price, so then this waits till next year when someone has some good information.
Well, the proponent's not here.
And the
That's-
proponent's
I
not
have a
here,
problem
so I
with
don't,
talking about
to me,
without
it's
the
like, let's
proponent.
move on. I don't understand, like, why are we doing?
What's your
talking about
address?
it?
I think we're ready to move on.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I mean, I'm trying, I don't
If the
understand
chief
it.
wants to submit something before next week, he may.
I'll send him an email.
But,
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay.
so we come to the Girl Scout house. Okay?
We've done lots of steady, diligent, thoughtful work.
Right?
Good evening.
She's not coming to my house
Good
either.
evening.
Hello.
My name's Peg Doyle, and I'm representing the Girl Scouts tonight. And when Trish gets back, she can start off a presentation. She's going to get it working, but we can start. You have a handout in front of you, and the presentation is just a quick slideshow for everybody watching from their homes, just to give a background on what the project's all about. So I'll just go through that very quickly, and then we can answer some questions. There are 4 things I wanted to just go through tonight. One is just to review the uses of the Girl Scout house, a little bit about the history, what are the preservation needs, and then what are the benefits back for the town for doing this project. So on your handout, you'll see we start here with how is it used, and the house was built for the Girl Scouts. It's still being used by the Girl Scouts, and right now, it's full of cookies. We have cookies in that house for 4 months of the year, December to March. So that's one thing. We have 250 troop meetings. It's a very, very active Girl Scout organization in town with 400 registered girls every year. It's used for campings, 10 to 15 overnights every year. We have leadership programs for girls are held at the house, volunteer training and planning, and other scouts in town, the Boy Scouts, the Cub Scouts, the Campfire Girls, they all use it. But the use goes beyond Scouts into other organizations, which I'll touch on in a moment. So a few key points about the history of the house. Bertha Stringer is the famous person in Girl Scouts. She started Girl Scouts here in Hingham in 1917. She's one of the descendants of Edmund Hobart in 1633, which I found very interesting. But about, what's that, 12 years after Girl Scouts was founded in Hingham, the Girl Scout house was built. And it was the first Girl Scout house built in New England and the 4th or 5th Girl Scout house built in our country. So it does have a very significant history to the organization. It was built by the community, and we actually have the list of all the people who donated their time and services to build the house. For example, Plymouth Quarries donated $1,000 to build the foundation. And Godfrey Downer was the architect who designed it. He donated his services. And not just built by the community, but it's been used by the community throughout the past 84 years. I've mentioned all the Scouts, but here's a list of other organizations that have used it. For example, the First Church of Christ Science, they used it on Sunday mornings while their building was being constructed. South Shore Tennis Association, they registered their kids for summer programs using the house. The Women's Club, also known as the Ladies Club, they have annual meetings there. Historic Society included it on their tour a couple of years ago, which was pretty exciting for us. The Garden Club just used it throughout the month of November for their wreaths, and the Community Center even used it this week because they have to relocate their classes somewhere while they're preparing for cabaret, so they're using the Girl Scout house. So it does have expanded use beyond the Scouts, and we're happy to share it with other organizations in town. The last thing on the history, I just wanted to go through the financial transition, which is why we're here this year. The building has been financed by the Hingham community for the first 30 years, and then the area-wide Girl Scouts came in and gave support. Starting in 1957, there was financial support from the council, and that has just come to an end this past October 1st. So from this point forward, we are looking at our own funds locally to do the preservation of the building, the maintenance of it, and the operations. So we are here today to do that. The house needs a lot of work. So moving into what are the preservation needs, Tricia, if you can fast forward to,
You have it set on auto, sorry. Yeah. Oh, can I go forward? I think so. Actually, no, because that's not my, it was quicker. So.
oh, okay.
So tell me where you want to be
The preservation needs?
for the house. Do you happen to know what number slide?
No, I don't, I'm sorry.
Around here.
Keep going. Right there. Okay. What are the preservation needs? So we put into 3 phases. The immediate means right now. I mean, like right now, in the next couple of months. So we're not applying for the money for the immediate needs. And that, there's 3 things that fall underneath that. We have to get the roof done. It's got a tarp on it. We have to replace the furnace. We have no choice. We need a new furnace, and the gas pipes have started to be installed already. And the third part is we have to remove the trees that were overshadowing the house and causing the roof and the siding to deteriorate prematurely. So those 3 items we need to do right now, and that the pricing for those you can see on the slide here too, plus our operations. Thank you. Is $35,000 immediately, and I'm real happy to say we have funded it. We've done a year-end campaign, we've done fundraisers, and we have donated services. So we are ready to replace the roof as soon as the weather allows us to. I'm happy to say Local Union 33 is donating the labor to get the roof done. And we hope to work with the local lumber company to get a great price on materials, but I can't give you the name of that yet. That's not set up. But our year-end campaign netted $10,000 in donations from the great people of this community in 6 weeks' time. So that was from our members, former Girl Scouts in the community, and individuals in the community as well as organizations. So we're very, very pleased with that. Thank you. The next step is the stabilization, once our immediate needs are taken care of, which includes, as you can see on this slide, we've got paint, trim, and flashing. We're trying to preserve the exterior of the building here. Windows. We have the original 12 over 12. We're trying to save them so that we have glazing that's needed on the windows. The third piece is the retaining wall. We have erosion and moisture issues coming in on the right side of the building. French drains, gutters, and downspouts, hoping to get rid of leaks that are coming through the foundation. The foundation is in great shape, but we have leaks coming through. To keep it in great shape, we have to stop the water. We have a basement door on the exterior of the building. Water's leaking in through there, so we want to modify the slab on the bottom of that, bottom of the stairs. And then we want to preserve the front stairs also and the front door. So that's what the CPC application is in a nutshell. The next phase of the preservation, it totals $98,000. Can you back up one? And in summary, it does two things for us. It resolves the drainage issues, and it preserves the architectural details of the building. So that's an overall summary of the project. And then the benefits back to the community, there's three. One is we have a wonderful historic meeting space available to the community. And this is an interior shot of the main hall here. The second is that we are providing ongoing community service back to Hingham, the Girl Scouts are. I have examples up here of some of the projects that have been done in the past year. Energy audits at the school, trail markers, Best Buddy programs, a garden at South School, a new website for diabetes for children, children with diabetes, internet training for seniors. This list goes on and on. So investing in the Girl Scouts, there is a return back to the community every single year. And then beyond that, leadership opportunities, we're investing in the girls. We're investing in 400 girls every year, giving them confidence, character, and commitment to turn around and come back and make this world a better place. So that's it in a nutshell. I'd like to open it to any questions.
Has Roger Fernandez looked at the numbers?
No, he hasn't. Should he look at them before next week? These numbers were created by Strikalowski Architecture and James Monroe, who is a general contractor and on our board of directors.
Has that already been submitted to us? I just don't know.
Yes. They were submitted in the
That's the
original.
spreadsheet. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And has Roger reviewed these, or?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Should Roger be getting a copy from me, or is that something that
Carol?
the board does?
Yeah.
You will do that?
And then if he has
Okay.
questions, he should go to Peg.
It
That
would
be
probably be
fine.
good to get his insights before we have to vote next week,
Yeah.
right?
Should I call Roger and set up an appointment then, or? Great. Good.
And is there a way for the Girl Scouts to bear some of the $98,000 cost? I mean, I understand you've already basically contributed $35,000.
Well, what would happen next is we will have a fundraiser, perhaps in June. We haven't planned it, but we have to have fundraisers every year from this point forward.
And that was kind of my next question. Is there sort of a long-term plan?
Oh, absolutely.
For the Girl Scouts to be sustainable?
Yes.
In this location?
Yes, there is.
So you're gonna have to have maintenance money, like depreciation money, but real money set aside.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, right now, the estimate is $7,000 a year right now, running the house as it is. We don't want to be in the business of running a house. That's not our job, but we do need to keep it going. One of the sources of income will be rental. For example, the community center is paying us to use it this month, and we now have a dance class that started every Tuesday night. They've rented the house, so that's going to supplement it. In addition to that, We do expect to have an increase in the sleepovers using the house. Out-of-town Girl Scouts come and use the house for $100 a night for a sleepover. That's going to help fund it. And then we will have fundraisers.
Other questions, comments?
Oh, I think you've done a great job.
Yeah.
It's
Great
been pretty
proposal.
creative.
Yeah.
Yeah,
From the first time
Thank
we've
you.
seen this.
Yeah.
Very good.
very thorough.
We have a great board of directors, too, by the way. I'd like to introduce Jerry Duff and Mariel Thorne are 2 members. We have 10 on our board of directors, and everybody is really committed to saving this building for the community.
I know Peg is pretty tenacious in talking to her about getting, I mean, it's, applaud you on trying to get this roof done. I mean, in terms of getting people to volunteer their times, like the, you know, the labor unions, and to get people to donate things at cost is, it's impressive.
And I must tell you, it's wonderful to be in the center of all these generous people. Everybody you ask, they all want to help, and it's just a wonderful place to be, so it's great to be part of the community. So,
Good.
thank you all.
Thank you
Questions or
very
any
much.
comments from any members of the public?
Thank you.
Thanks, Peg.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we come to Ames Chapel.
Hi. For the record, my name is Larry Lindner. I'm the president of the Board of Directors of Hingham Cemetery, and I'm here on behalf of the cemetery's Ames Chapel, which sits in the far northwest corner of the cemetery near the South Street entrance. And Bob, you had asked us to catch you up rather than go over old territory, so I'll tell you where we've been and where we've been going since I last spoke to you.
Maybe for members of the public, you might give a capsule overview of what the Ames Chapel is and what's been done already with CPC money and.
Okay, sure. So the Ames Chapel is an 1886 Queen Anne Victorian edifice that was originally used for funeral services, and it fell into disuse in the 1920s and basically rotted for 90 years. And the cemetery's aim is to bring it back into contemporary use and have it available not just for funeral services, but for all kinds of events where any Hinghamite or Hingham organization could make use of the chapel at cost. That would include small weddings, wedding rehearsal dinners, conferences, symposiums, classes, chamber music concerts, and the list goes on. It's sort of whatever people could think of, we would be happy for the chapel to host that event or that activity. So that's sort of the overview. The price of the renovation and the restoration of the chapel is approximately $930,000. We've always presented it to CPC as a 3-legged stool, where the cemetery's endowment would pay $310,000. We were asking for $310,000 from CPC, and we would raise $310,000 ourselves from other funds. So we're good for the $310,000. CPC gave us $280,000 last year and told us in writing in our contract that they would look favorably on giving us the last $30,000 this year, which is why I'm standing here tonight. And we have raised over $230,000 from other places, including private citizens, and we got $65,000 from the Massachusetts Historic Commission last year, and we're going to go back to them this year for more money, and it's a bit of a long shot because that's our second ask. But on the other hand, they have invited us to come back to them for another ask, and when people invite us to ask for money, we don't say no. So we feel confident that we're going to get there to our 930. There may be, even after Massachusetts Historical Commission's next round, when they give us money, there might be something like $23,000 in the gap, and we will start looking under the couch cushions and we will find it. So we feel very confident that we are going to raise all the funding needed to complete the project. So is that an okay overview?
Excellent, thanks.
Okay. So now to catch you up. We had John Cavanero prepare a site plan very recently in December that specifically focused on parking, and he gave us different scenarios, and we chose the one that we liked best. And between Christmas and New Year's, we brought it to Emily Wentworth of the Zoning Board, and she was very pleased with what she saw, and she said she expected no problems, and she anticipated no back to the drawing board scenarios whatsoever. So we were very glad about that, and we felt it was important to get that meeting in with Emily fast, because parking is an issue, and we want to make sure that we have that set. On the, I forget if it was the last, yeah, it was December 30th in the morning, we, well, let me back up. We are going to have a contractor do cost estimates for the pre-construction documents and the construction documents to understand our costs as we go along. And as per your suggestion, Bob, we're also going to ask Roger to look at the pre-construction and the construction documents to give his numbers for what he thinks things should cost. And we put out the proposal to about 8 contractors, both in town and without town, to bid on doing the pre-construction cost estimates. And 5 of them showed up to a walkthrough at the end of December, and they have to get us proposals for their pre-construction bidding by the 13th, and then we'll interview whichever ones look good, and we'll make that decision within a week from there. We'll have the pre-construction documents by February and the construction documents by April, and we are still on target to begin the whole big piece of the restoration renovation process in late spring, early summer. What I neglected to say before in my overview was we've already done stabilization with the building with the MHC grant that we had to match with our own money. So that's sort of where we're at right now. We're moving forward beautifully. We're on time with our little green timeline that we gave you, and we are very confident that we're going to be reopening the chapel in the spring of 2015, and we're going to do it Andrew Jackson style with everybody on the lawn and everybody invited and partaking, and we're really excited about it. But I don't want to underestimate the fact that we are still gunning for those last dollars, and that last $30,000 from CPC is very important to the project.
And you did just get some Greenbush Trust Fund.
Oh, I forgot to say that. Yes, we were very fortunate. On December 16th, the Hingham Historical Commission granted the project $25,000 from the Greenbush Fund, and that got our gap well under, under 100,000 if the CPC money comes through, and that's good for our fundraising efforts because a 5-figure gap looks much better to potential contributors than a 6-figure gap. And don't you know, between Christmas and New Year's, we got several $1,000s in contributions because some people like me went around saying, guess what? We got down to a 5-figure gap. So money is still coming in. Yeah. Are there questions or comments?
Just a comment, when we went to the building recently, I was started coming to the comment, but they structurally, I mean, not glamorous stuff, very solid, basically, quite impressive.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, that was the aim, to make the envelope very sound and to make everything structurally sound.
That was an amazing job you've done
Oh.
on the fundraising.
Thank you.
And the chapel. It's beautiful, even though it's a ways to go.
Oh, you ain't seen nothing yet, but thank you very much. It's going to be really nice.
Thank you.
Questions or comments from the public?
Good.
Thank you
Very
so
good.
much.
Thanks, Harry.
That's an easy one.
Yeah,
you gonna do after
we're
this is all done?
ready for the old Colony Mason.
I know.
But isn't, are we
Are
ahead
you
of schedule?
going to take the lead, Bill?
Yeah, I believe.
Dan?
Oh, good evening, good to see everybody again. We do have a lot of MSI membership with us tonight. I have to take this three, everybody can briefly stand.
Welcome.
As we said earlier, we are hoping to get funding for a new slate roof for our building. Old Colony Lodge goes back as a community, as a part of our community, goes back to 1792. The lodge has been part of our part of Hingham community for about 207 years. The building specifically goes back to 1928. At that time, the Masonic Lodge was built in the colonial revival structure, which included a slate roof, brick walls, and copper gutters. The slate roof was a wonderful part of the building. It lasted about 60 years. In the mid-1980s, well, it was a great roof at the time, but it wasn't put together that well. It became a little porous, and there was water damage done at the time. So in 1980, The lodge kind of did patchwork on the roof, and lacking capital, had to go with shingles it is today. The shingles were effective, obviously, but today we find ourselves with water damage again and problems with the roof on the building. So we would like to go back to the original roof, in keeping with the history of the building and the history of the area. The main part of the lodge is really considered a crown jewel in the Masonic community. It houses, the building is on the national and the state historic registrars. It houses a variety of historic treasures, Masonic tools, paintings, other parts of Masonic history. The building itself, as I talked about last time, I won't go into it in detail tonight, but the lodge has done a significant amount of work in terms of renovations within the building. We've redone the bathrooms. We've made them accessible to those with disabilities. We put in a lift for those with disabilities. We've redone the heating system. We've redone the drainage. We've done tremendous amount of work. Now, the reason why we were able to do this work is because the membership who do this for a living donated it at cost. Unfortunately, we don't have anybody who can do a roof. So we find ourselves now with a situation where we would like to go back to the slate roof, and we need some help financially. I'll end, and I'll let Dana pick up on it, is that we do house a number of different constituencies. Not only does it's the home of Old Colony Lodge, obviously, but Macedonian Lodge uses the building. St. Stephen's Royal Chapter Arch uses the building. Demolay and the Eastern Star, which are leadership programs for young men and young women, use our building. The Boy Scouts use it. Toys for Tots drives. The CHIPS program uses our building. We regularly hold programs for those with hearing disabilities or sight disabilities. In fact, I can't think of any time where we have never opened our doors to an organization who needs it. So I would submit to you that the public use of our building and the public need is significant and is bona fide. And I'll let my colleague Dana go from there.
Thank you, Bill.
Evening, Dana.
How are you guys?
Good.
I'm nervous as usual. You know, I was standing out here with the other brothers out here, and I was looking out. I went to junior high at this place here. And there's two portraits right out on the wall here, which are displayed prominently. One is Benjamin Lincoln, and the other is George Washington. Both Masonic Masons, they're brothers. Along with, you know, numerous historical figures nationwide, and you all know that. So I'm just going to tell you about a few of the brothers, all right, that have graced this building that we're talking about and this town. And some of these names will sort of read like a road map. There's Whitten, there's Lincoln, there's Loring, there's Faring, there's Gill, there's Hersey, there's Wilder, there's Burr, there's Marsh, there's Whitney, there's Foster, Cortell, Pratt, Thayer, Cushing, Downing, Stoddard, Howard, Sprague, Cross, Downing, Bickford. There's Kimball, there's Gardner Jones, there's Oscar Beck, there's Tower, there's Mayo, there's Studley, there's Bates, there's Tufts, Weston, Emery, Danstra, Sullivan, Shaw, there's Bob Olson, there's Glenn Olson, there's Ernie Sophis, Veteran of the Year. There's Crest, there's Brewer, there's Perkins, Parsons, Noble, and Brown. These are all brothers and have been brothers. They're people that have been in this community for as long as this lodge has been here, which has been in Hingham for 207 years, continually. We have two Medal of Honor winners that are brothers. There's Foss, Spanish-American War. There's Blackmar, who's the Civil War, which is a brand new thing that just popped up. He happened to be a brother. Imagine that. There's people that belong to our organization
that live in this town, that have always lived in this town, that go out and raise money for scholarships, for Toys for Tots, the Food Pantry, Relay for Life, which is a cancer organization, the Red Cross, the Angel Fund, which gives supplies to kids in school who can't afford it, calculators, books, notebooks. The Shriners Burn Centers, we donate our cans and our tabs. We raise money on this on a continual yearly basis to help the transportation of the parents and the kids to and from the hospitals. My Chips, which is identifying children, ours, yours, mine, so in case whatever may happen, we can locate them. Research, the Heart Research Foundation in New York, which we just started doing in the last 3 years to develop research to help heart disease in the United States. The dyslexic centers, which I'm starting to understand. There's scholarships that we do right here in the town of Hingham. There's the Rainbow Girls that we support, which is one of the oldest rainbow camps down in Hanson. We just went through 3 years of rebuilding that ourselves. The DeMolay Boys, the hurricane relief that we do for hurricane victims in Irene and down in New York. Care packages we sent to the 1058th when they were overseas. I mean, we have donated our building for making bandages for World War I and II. We let every year the 4th of July band come and sleep at our place, and we feed them breakfast. The Scouts, they come in, they do their derby races at our place. Book supplies for the students are done there. We constantly, the Old Ship Church, I mean, we let their Sunday school participate there when they were really doing the parish house over. We are an intricate part of this community. And when you talk about community preservation, you have to ask yourself, what is it? Is it a building? Is it trails? Is it recreation? Is it the open space? Or is it community, the people? I think the community is the people. And all that other stuff is the infrastructure that supports those people. We've been operating in this town for 207 years, and I don't recall in our minutes that we've ever asked for anything for our behalf. And every time we do a fundraiser for whatever charity or organization we're trying to help, we don't take a nickel for administrative cost or heat or overhead or anything. We take that 100% and we give it to the charity. We're here today, and like I've said before, we don't normally do this. We don't go out looking for money. It's something we don't feel comfortable in doing. I know I don't. I know that we got some money from the Historical Commission, which was fantastic, very nice. We really enjoyed that. That was nice, and we hope to get enough from this committee so that we don't have to ever come back and ask for this. We'd like to get the project done. We'd like to get the roof over our head so we can continue on the work that we do without standing in front of a camera, holding up a check, without looking for attaboys or hands on the back to help us. We don't want that. We just want to go ahead and do what we like to do and do it quietly. You know, for every dollar that we don't get and we have to raise from our network of donators, from either our brethren or going out and looking for the money to raise, every dollar we have to reach into our pocket and put towards the roof is a dollar that those kids don't get, the dollar that scholarships don't get, the dollar that the heart funds don't get, because you can't give to one without taking from the other. And we don't want to take from the other. We would like to give everything we get back to the community like we've been doing for 207 years in this town of Hingham alone. Thanks.
A couple of things, Dana. As I understand it, you now have a lower bid.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. This is not the Historic Commission. We have a bid of $227,000 for the roof. With the funds that the Historical Commission has granted us of $25,000 leaves approximately $200,000. We would, You know, we understand you may not be able to give us all of that, even though we would love it, but we understand you won't be able to give us all of that. When we look at what we were started off with, we got the bids and everything else down by about $75,000. We've applied for the state grant through Mr. Bob Hedlund, a very good friend, and his father was a mason. Bob is not, unfortunately. He says he's too busy for that. Maybe as he gets a little older, he'll change his mind. But he's going to assist us in getting that $50,000. And so that's approximately about $150,000 from the original $300,000 we're looking. So I guess basically what we're trying to get out of you folks here is around $150,000. So that we can put the roof on and continue doing the work that we need to do without any fanfare. I mean, I had to drag these brothers out because they don't like me out in the camera. And as you can tell, I'm not a very good public speaker. I get nervous at it. Fortunately, we have our partner here, Bill, who happens to be a great brother and speaks very elegantly.
One of the things.
I would say I have a question. I don't think anyone disputes the value of the work that's being done, but if it's really a request for roofing, and we just had a proponent with maybe a somewhat similar sized building asking, mentioning they're doing roofing for $17,000. So it's, yeah, so I mean, so is the organization really the building, or is it, I mean, I guess trying to understand, preserving the building at a lower cost so that we can use the money we have to help other groups?
Understood.
Or is the slate so important that we should, I'm not quite sure why the slate is such a critical part of your mission, when you could do it for maybe 1/10 the cost.
Well, I think.
And that's a thing, to me, it feels a little bit like gold plating.
Well, one of the things, that's a great question, we've talked about this. One of the things about the modern day slate roofs is that they're estimated to last, I think, 80 to 100 years. So the first slate roof was effective, but today when they put them on, it'd be 80 to 100 years. So we would never have to replace the roofs in any of our lifetimes again. And it gets back to the historical structure of the building. So that's why we would like to try to get the slate roof done if we could.
I think when you look architecturally at the two building types, one is a wood frame building, which is a totally different building. The Girl Scout house is a totally different building than this building in terms of its architecture, in terms of the systems architecture in the building. This building is a brick masonry building, and the design of the building and the roof shape was designed to be clad with a breathing roofing material. And slate roof is the best material to do that on this kind of a building. Buildings like this don't vent and breathe the way simple gable roof buildings perform. And I think that one of the things, I was really happy when I saw the estimates and scope reviews of this, that they were focusing on the slate, because the best life cycle decision to preserve this building for the longest time in the future is to put a slate roof on it. It does, yes, it is, from a short-term cost perspective, more expensive, but from a life cycle cost perspective, it's the best way to go. The current roof, which is, and I took a really close look at the attic and looked at the site visit, I thought was very important, because you really could see how the building is weathering and performing. An asphalt roof that's on there now doesn't breathe. It doesn't work with the current building's design. In order to make that roof perform, you'd have to change the design of the roof. It's one of the reasons why they're having condensation and water problems now, is because of the limits of an asphalt roof. So I think that life cycle and long-term, the most cost-effective way to do this building would be to do it with a black slate, Monson slate, with the proper copper flashings, and it would last at least 80 years.
Is there even a legal CPA rationale to, I mean, I don't think a asphalt roof is within our purview anyway. That's not historic preservation. So I don't think.
Yeah, a roof preserves the building. So
I think that's where I'm going.
An asphalt roof would preserve the building, but.
But is that consistent with what we would be doing according to historic preservation standard? I mean, you're in the historic commission.
Yes.
It would.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we've done roofing projects before.
That have been asphalt.
That have been, and actually, to come back to the original question, the ultimate cost of a slate roof, as opposed to 3 asphalt roofs or 4 asphalt roofs, is actually less expensive.
I'm not advocating for the asphalt roof, I just, I
But
didn't think we could even
I think you have
fund
to
the asphalt
justify it,
roof.
because for people in town to hear that a roof is going on that costs like $200,000, when people everyone has their own roof, they might go, what's going on here? You know,
I think
because
it's the
again, it has to be
building type.
made very clear to people what's going on.
I think it's the building type. If you have a gable roof, it's a very simple form, it can work with an asphalt shingle system. But that's a residence. A residence, a whole different construction type than this kind of a building. This is an institutional building, a masonry building. It's like a church. It's a different kind of a building type than a residence and a home. And anything you do on a building like this is going to cost more, given its size and given its configuration, than you're going to spend on a much smaller residence kind of a building.
And Gary, just to extend your point, because I certainly support the asphalt roof, not the asphalt, well, the slate roof. Remember when we redid Central Fire Station?
Right.
We did that with the slate roof for much the same reasons, even though it was very expensive and there was a great deal of discussion, but it was the right decision.
Because to me,
As
this is better, I mean, again, this probably to clarify it, because again, to talk about the good the group does, doesn't really address what the question is about, you know, the expense of the roof and why it's architecturally important. To me, it's not necessarily relevant to the mission of the group that lives in the building. So that's why, I mean, I think it makes it clear to understand, you know, what's the architectural issues here, not necessarily the value. I mean, all these groups do valuable work. We're not debating the value of the masons. It's, do you need that kind of roof?
It was
Because-
the original roof with slate.
Right, so I mean, that's what people are gonna need to
Around it.
understand in town meeting. If someone looks at this and go, wow, you know, what's this all about?
And I-
Because they don't understand it.
But for all the reasons that an asphalt roof was put on the building, it was put on for compromises, and it's a compromise solution to the problem, which only lasted 20 years, and it never really worked, and so now we're back at the same point. So it's not just, it's not an aesthetic decision, it's a system decision as to what the building was originally designed and specified to have is what it should be replaced with. Anything else is going to be a 20-year problem that they're going to have to deal with, and it's not going to last the 20 years because the current roof is not lasting the 20 years now. So I think it would be a mistake to do a compromise, and I think from a preservation point of view, we're really talking about preserving the building so that they can perform their mission in the building without having to be distracted on the building's needs at an unrealistic, you know, a frequency, which is how I see we got to this point right now.
Well, I think we need to recognize the good work they have done in being caretakers of the building that they have and doing all that they can to the point where the roof did fail again. So I'm all for the asphalt roof.
Well, and we haven't
The
seen, and this,
asphalt roof.
oh,
Slate roof.
and we haven't seen, and we, I mean, I know you presented earlier in this season with the litany of projects that you detailed, and while we actually have a dollar value of what the Girl Scouts have done on their own dime, we don't have that,
Yes,
so
you
it.
Yeah, it was
Of what,
in-
you-
it was, oh yeah, it was in one of
Should be
the.
Okay, so I'm actually commending you for the self-funded work, not critiquing you for that.
I will
He's
say
got it
that at our petition before.
Okay, I guess I
At our
hadn't seen this
petition for
earlier.
Green Bush
Okay.
mitigation funds, the fire chief unsolicited got up and spoke in support of our roof. And he said that some of the fire buildings have slate roofs. And he said they're going on 80 to 100 years.
He's actually said the same thing to this committee earlier.
Did he? Yeah.
When he was here presenting on behalf of the Constitution sign, he observed the value of the slate roof. As you've recognized, there's a lot of compression in terms of demand for CPA funds this year and every year. Assuming that the CPC finds its way to recommend a substantial contribution, but it doesn't come quite up to the 150, is the project going to get done with slate?
We are, We are going to exhaust every avenue we possibly can through state and federal grants. Like we've done with the historical thing, like we're doing with the state historical. We will try to maybe even hit look at the Department of the Interior for their national parks. And we may end up putting our building on the National Register to qualify for those additional funds, which will take some time. We could end up coming back here next year and asking for some continuation, of some more financing from you folks. We really don't want to do that because it's painful for us and it distracts from what we really like raising funds for. That's basically where I'm at here. The 150 is what we need.
Gary, the building we're in a historic district, would the historic district's commission even allow other than a slate roof?
I think the commission would look at what's the proper roofing system to preserve the building, which would be the roofing system that the building was originally designed with. I think that's how, I think they would vet that. And I think if a building was 50 years old to be an historic building and it started out that way and that was the appropriate system, they might go with an alternative system. But on this building where it was really part of the design intent to do it this way, I think you'd probably go back to the original design intent.
Slate roof.
Yeah. And I remember when you first came before the board back in November, whatever time that was.
Right.
I had written down the notes that the slate was 247 and the asphalt was 165.
Yes.
And my thought then was thinking, kind of along what Kathy was saying, that, do you really need to have a slate? Perhaps we can go asphalt, and perhaps if we funded the cost of the asphalt and you came up with the funding to bump up to the cost of the slate, then I would be thinking that would be a nice
Right,
mix.
I think
But you've already, seems to me that just since that short period of time, you've already done that.
We've done as much as we can at this stage in
So
this amount of time. We have
that's
not given
fantastic.
up. We have not given up to.
No, I'm sure you're not.
To get lower bids on the roof by other contractors. We haven't given up on that. We don't have anything at the moment we can present to you, but we haven't given up in doing that.
But it seems to me you're almost asking for the amount of money to cover the asphalt of what the quote was,
Right.
So,
I mean,
I think that's really.
we've aggressively
amazing.
solicited other bids. We've talked multiple times about other funding sources, and we're committed to funding it ourselves as well, So there's going to be a mix there, but we're committed to
I
seeing the
think
project work.
it's great hearing that Senator Headland's helping you.
Oh, absolutely.
That says a lot too, that he's supporting this project.
Yes.
When would the work be done?
Well, if we get funded right now, it'll be done by September of this year.
And these other grants, you'd find out about them when?
We've already found out about the historical one. We'll
Right.
find out about this one the 15th, is it? January
This is-
15th?
You mean the CPA funds?
CPC.
What about the,
We haven't filed on that, so I don't know what the timeline is on the state funding. So, I mean, I've sent him all the documentation, all of that, but they open up those grants at certain times of the year. And I have not heard at what time that's gonna happen or when it'll close.
But we'll update you with any information.
Right.
Just the town meeting approves funding, and then money wouldn't, after we signed a contract, that's not available till July, is that?
Well, we wouldn't start until July 1st, to tell you the truth.
And you'd be able to get that done that quickly?
We're still in session through June. And we don't stop until after the 4th of July because we house the band. And so we wouldn't be doing anything disruptive in that building until probably the second week
The
in
timing does
July.
work, okay.
And we don't start up again until the second week in September. So hopefully within that 2-month period, we should be able to accomplish, 95% of that work.
so depending on what this committee decides, I mean, suppose, for example, we decided on the full 150, does that then mean you have to tell the state you've got the money and you can't
Well, no,
We
I-
can't get the benefit of any state grant?
No, I mean, if we apply for the state grant and they give us the $50,000, then we'll use theirs instead of this one.
Right.
Whichever one, because I mean,
We'll
state,
write that into our grant agreement if we.
absolutely.
Yeah, we would return it if we
Yeah,
can.
we don't want any extra money.
Yeah, we
Believe me,
just
we don't want any extra
want,
money.
we just want the roof.
Yeah, we just want what we
Just
have,
want a
to
roof.
get it done, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's legally possible, we would return it. We don't need it.
Oh, sure, yeah. Yeah, we don't need any
No,
extra,
we-
we don't want any extra.
We have unused funds come back to us all the time. It just seems to me that if you're applying for state money, they're probably asking for disclosures about what you have. And-
Right.
And if you were to say to them, well, Hingham CTC recommended X, Y, Z in terms of money.
Right, so the 25 and the 150 is
Yeah.
175, we're looking for 227, their 50 covers that.
Oh, okay. All right,
I think you've done a great job.
great.
Right.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
And
Thank you.
thanks for all the community work. And if the brothers want to applaud for Bill and Dana.
Under CPC.
Okay.
Probably have to redesign the roof if you put an asphalt roof to do the venting, because it doesn't vent. But that's not historic preservation. That's the reason why it failed, exactly, you have to change the design.
I just couldn't, I mean,
That's why it failed.
They made me feel like I was all.
I've heard publicity and I've heard
No, I understand, no, you're raising a question.
You know, it's like,
Yeah.
we're not debating, we're not doing a good job. How does our...
I need to.
And you said,
Thanks for sharing. We're going to take a 5-minute recess for,
Okay, and you see it as an aesthetic, you say, okay, I can understand that. But the reason is-
oh my goodness. Are you all set and ready to go?
talking about is the organization, not the structural issues, and that's what we're really having to look at. Oh, no, not at all, no, not at all, yeah. Yeah.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Appreciate it.
One of the sad things, you know, is the Masonic Hall in Quincy community doesn't have a house anymore.
Just talking about how people come from all over the
Press
state.
report. One of the
They
things-
figured everything.
One of the
Well, the
things that
historical
happened
value.
in the Masonic Hall in Quincy. I mean, I don't go into limestone.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, there are a lot of,
I just don't understand how we can, because they're proposing replacing asphalt materials. It doesn't seem consistent with what CPA is doing. I mean, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like a bastardized solution.
I mean, it preserves a building that's.
But it's not a historic material. It's not the historic material for that. But I think, to me, it's the best.
You get preserve it by putting a tarp on it.
I would have said,
No, but that's not a historically.
You get preserve it by putting asphalt shingles on it.
historic buildings.
So again, it's getting better information.
Oh, no, but if it did, you know, I think.
Oh, right, but this one doesn't right
The
now.
problem is, I mean, St. Paul's Church is a historic. It's got a siding sign.
Right.
It's got one of those
Historic,
beautiful,
oh my God, doesn't it ever?
Yeah,
you know, with crosses.
God, let's,
How
we
do
don't have
we
to do
draw
that
the
one,
line
do
on
we?
some of these things? I'm worried about where do you draw the line on other stuff? And where do you draw the line on ADA? On some of these
The
buildings?
ADA stuff scares me more than the slate roof.
Well, quite frankly, I think that most of the stuff they've done in the interior would not qualify for historic preservation. But the ADA is in fact would.
Which is
ADA where?
Yeah, the Masonic Hall.
Oh, yeah, we're not trying to pay for that.
No, they've already paid for it. But I'm just saying in terms of things that they could have applied for CPA funds, they really haven't so far.
No, that's why this list, I actually had not seen this list. It's very impressive.
Dad, you don't read your, look at, I've read every word in this whole book. Go get it, Vicky, go get it. Every single word. Would you like me to recite it?
Vicky's here to just kick my butt.
I just like to tease you. I guess we are on a break. He's even doing it. And it's a shame.
Yeah, one of them is me.
Oh.
How are you?
How's my car?
You know, it's been sitting in the garage because of the snow. I'm driving out. I think it's Florida though. Vero Beach. My wife's brother lives there, and Beach Gardens.
As of October, as of 2 days before he was.
Better than other places, yes.
It's tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
It's all right. What do we have left? We have,
You're up. Let's go.
This is really the last one.
You ready?
You ready to make questions? I'll let somebody else do that. Fire it. Did you see this?
No, that's what we.
Immediate preservation and where.
Are we allowed to dim the lights, even if it's on camera? Just a little bit. You said yes. It's kind of hard to see. I should have followed the sides around, I think.
Oh, that's good.
Trying to go with the antique look, you know? Be aesthetically appropriate. So for those of you who haven't met me before, I'm Tricia Burns. I live in Hingham. And I am a friend of John Pitts, and I am the historic liaison for Thomas Barker House. So this is a little bit different than what we did with Greenbush. So you have my PowerPoint presentation in front of you, as well as the numbers and the breakdown of this project that we have now done a bit more work on the numbers and how the project's going to roll out, as well as getting bids on the project, especially on the roll costs in a couple of This is the first slide that we have changed since last time. Again, to show the historic value of this property to the community, and not just for its historic preservation, but what the history of the house itself has to offer the community of Hingham. Because I don't believe that most townspeople, including myself, would be aware of the history of this house and how important it really should be. Sorry, it's not on.
Actually, if you want to just bring it around.
Sure.
Thank you.
Oh, don't tell me my back is Yeah, but then I can't operate this because I don't have a remote, because it's my laptop. No, this is fine, I'll just sit. How's that? So part of what we found out about this house and having the Historic Society help me out a little bit with the research was that General John Winslow from the French and Indian Wars lived in the house. And he was born in Marshfield, he's a South Shore resident, but he is actually the descendant of the Pilgrim Edward Winslow. And his grandfather and great-grandfather were both governors of Plymouth, the Plymouth colony, not the town. So this is the original colonists, and that's what he is directly linked to. And then as he was in his adulthood, he became prominent in the different wars with England. This is all pre-revolution, of course. So he also was known, a great link to him was that he owned a slave, and his slave he freed, and the slave later left him for 13 years and wrote this narrative of the uncommon suffering and surprising deliverance of Britton Hammond, a Negro man, in 1760. And then in 1766, Winslow retired to Hingham, to this Thomas Barker house, and subsequently passed away in the house in 1774. So the tie-in here is that because of the history that he had and the incredible relationship, which was unusual in those days, with himself being the master. The cute story is that they were both coming back on a ship from London without knowing that the other one was on the ship, and they ran into each other on the ship. And it's written in this manuscript from the slave's perspective, saying, when I saw his face, we both brightened. They were so thrilled to see each other that he moved back here and stayed down here near Mr. Winslow because they were that close, which in those days was highly unusual. So our friend at the Commonwealth Museum in Boston, they have a exhibit coming up this year in 2014 that they want to include this in and include the photos of the house because they were already going to have his manuscript there. It's just interesting to have that linked in. And then the house you see up on the right is actually the house that's in Plymouth that was taken in the 20s, actually. This photo was from the 1920s, but the house was built in the 1730s. So that's the famous Winslow house that's in downtown Plymouth now. So it also links Hingham and this Thomas Barker house to Plymouth Plantation and to this downtown home in Plymouth, which creates a nice little South Shore run from, colonial America. People, I think it would be great in the future to link our towns and have an actual historic run like they have for the Paul Revere ride and that type of thing in Boston, because South Shore should be just as important, I think. But, so this was just another interesting fact that in the long term of this home and what it can bring to the community and the tourism that I think it can start to bring in, and my job with it is to link the history of it to venues like the Commonwealth Museum and even the Museum of African American History in Boston that does exhibits continually on this type of thing, as well as the military museums, and even Thomas Barker himself. And I will continue to do more historic research on this property to find out as much as we can in order to create this kind of revenue stream and tourism into downtown Hingham. So going forward, the rest of this we went through before, but a really amazing thing about this house is the preserved cellar that's in it, which you'll see in a future slide, that is from colonial times. The architectural aspects of the home that have been preserved already, that show the construction that they did in the 1750s, which is, to me, is fascinating, but I'm a history geek, so
Can I just ask a question? I think we all recognize this is a really historic property, but I know we're trying to focus on the funding aspects, and we have like sort of a shorter time period. Is there a way to kind of just talk about more like the funding request? Because I don't think there's any disagreement that we all know this is extremely historical, valuable property. So I think it's really, we're trying to make decisions about funding.
Right, I just wanted to go over the new findings that we had in this relevancy, because I mean, as a townsperson, I never knew that it had this much history until I started diving into researching it myself, and when I did this for the Greenbush meeting, they hadn't heard any of this history.
Right, so, but I mean,
So-
again, we're trying to make decisions about the funding, so I think that's really, I mean, again, I think we all recognize on the committee, this is a very important historic property. So, and I think we were pretty unclear about where the funding stood and the funding request.
Yeah.
So maybe if we could I think that's really what we're most
Do
interested
you
in.
guys have a more specific question, and I can go right to your question?
Well, I guess right now, I think on the sheet, I don't know if we have new proposal pending in terms of dollar amount. So we don't really have a dollar amount right now that we know that we're being asked for.
Well, it's on this that I handed, the handout that I
Okay, well,
did.
yes, we just got this.
Yeah.
And maybe if we could review that.
Yeah.
Because again, I mean, I think we understand, we know.
It just goes with the slides, because the slides, because I don't know how many of you actually got to do a property visit.
We
All
did.
We
all
did.
did.
Because you can't really go inside the house because of the beams.
Right.
So we went in and took pictures of all of the interior upstairs and down
Right.
to save next.
Right.
So you guys
So,
could see exactly why we're asking for this money.
When I went through the funding request that I have in front of me,
Joan, can you hit the lights, please?
I'm looking at a funding proposal that's about 750 to 784,000.
Yeah.
So, and I'm looking at a number of breakdowns here, and there's a first and a second and a third year estimate. So I'm looking at a total project estimate of somewhere around 700,000 to 800,000. And so what that would do is essentially rebuild this structure. What we have right now as a starting point on this structure is basically a shell. It has some of the components inside, but it's basically a shell. And it's a historic shell. Now, I guess the first question I would have is that I had heard that there was an initial plan to take this building apart and move it to Nantucket. And so I'm wondering, in the funding request here, is the basis of this funding request to restore this building and to take this original building that's been on this site from day one and restore it, and then have it be used as a building for a nonprofit organization? And is that nonprofit organization set up? Is this building owned by the nonprofit organization, or is this building still a private house that's owned by the proponent? And these are just all questions that I've had throughout this process that I'd like to get answered. And
Can I
then,
start with one at a time, though, because that was like
Okay.
5.
Yeah, well,
My
yeah.
memory's not that good, I have too
Sure.
many kids. So for starters, the house has sat and become in disrepair, which in these slides is another thing we showed, was all of the original work that the current homeowner had done to the house in the 80s. Because again, most people were not aware that there was a level of construction that had already been done to preserve the home then. So it's not a complete shell, because there are staircases existing, there are fireplaces existing. There's this fireplace mantle, all the wood has been preserved, and the wood slats upstairs have all been saved and preserved, as well as the doors. And there has been custom work to this fireplace that was uncovered from a wall, and the custom mantle rebuilt back onto it. So there are existing structures in there that we're trying to save if we can get the roof done so that it doesn't continue to wear out. The property right now is still owned by John Pitts. The goal with the property, there is an established 501c3 that is the animal rescue that would basically utilize the property as a headquarters.
But would they?
The house is not owned by that entity. The house What we hope to do is establish it within a foundation. So it will become the Thomas Barker House Foundation. And it will be deeded to the foundation, and the foundation will take care of the historic, upkeep of it and the preservation of the property itself.
But the question that I have is that the CPC doesn't, I don't think we've ever funded a privately owned residence.
Well, you're funding the
For-
Ames Chapel, which is privately owned and was left in neglect for 90 years. We've
No,
nowhere
that-
near
but
90
that's
years
owned-
on this.
But I'm saying that's owned by a nonprofit corporation.
Right, this will be too, because this is all contingent on us setting up a foundation, that it will be,
But the current applicant for this property right now that we're looking at,
right.
this building is not currently owned by a nonprofit.
Right, but CPC is allowed to give to a private individual, it says at least in your,
I don't think we fund renovations of private houses, do we?
if it has a community purpose, you do. It's in your bylaw anyway, I read it myself.
Gary, I think
The
another street-
CPA allows for historic preservation, I think regardless of ownership.
Okay.
I think we helped with a house on Levitt Street that then did a facade easement, or, conservation restriction.
But
It's a private house.
And to bring people up to date, the Historical Commission heard presentations on this with respect to the Greenbush Trust Fund. And the Historical Commission primarily addressed at this point in time the immediate preservation need of making the building weather-tight to prevent any further deterioration. And because of that, a Greenbush Preservation Trust grant was given to stop the deterioration. And I don't know if any, that didn't happen long ago. I don't know if anything has been done yet.
That's only been a couple of weeks, so we're
Right.
still, we're working.
How much is that grant for?
But
It was for $7,500 so that we could get the weatherization portion of it done in order to be able to preserve and do the construction to the house itself.
May I make a comment?
Absolutely.
Something that puzzles me is why nobody has half an hour to put the panes back in the windows and tack the window shed. I mean, leaving those windows open for all these years, somebody said it's great, it's good ventilation, takes the moisture out. But no, actually,
They haven't been open all these years, actually.
those panes have been panes missing for years, so I fantasized getting some plastic cloth and being a criminal, going up there with another person out there. Not carrying it.
I mean, they actually in the 80s had rebuilt all the windows and custom built them with Peter Bickford.
Mike?
Had done it with the owner himself, and they re-customed all the windows. But they have been open, and that's part of the weatherization, was that we were gonna board up the windows and air, make it all airtight so that it
I mean,
can't.
I know it's a tiny expense, it just seems symbolic of some strange past attitude that they were left open all this time. I know there's much more important things, more major things to be done.
Yeah, I mean,
On the
the
way
initial
home, you know.
concern was the weatherization of it and just being able to close it up to the elements in order to preserve what is already able to be preserved on the inside as well as the outside. So for our proposal now that we've been able to really detail it is it's a 2-year project. And for year 1, we want to be able to at least get the stabilization, the roof done, the structural work done, and the facade restoration so that it looks beautiful downtown and is usable to the community.
we're just seeing this for the first time tonight.
Right.
Where did the first 2 pages come from?
Come from, as far as who wrote them?
Right, what's the source of the information and the cost information?
It's coming from the bids that we've gotten from the contractors that John and Kurt created this timeline.
Are there actual bids, though?
Yes, you guys have the actual bids?
I mean,
Do you have the actual bids from Wilcox and the?
No, I don't.
I mean-
Their price would determine on square footage until they really get into the project, going over a set of plans and things. There's still a few variables as far as exact quote, but it's not uncommon for a project like that to be about $250 per square foot.
but historically, this committee, in looking at proposals for construction, has had very detailed line-item bids where we can actually take a look at the cost, and we can have our town engineer take a look at the cost so we can appropriately evaluate the proposal. And what we are allowed to award money for is for historic preservation. But some of the things like $17,500 in plumbing, or $12,000 in electrical, or $17,500 in HVAC, and a sprinkler system, we don't really have any good way of evaluating those sorts of things.
Well, I based it on, I looked at some of the other proposals that came in from other organizations that went through it, so I saw the others put in the same HVAC and plumbing and things that are necessary to complete the building, so I basically followed what other people had done.
What are you referring to, John?
Well, for instance, I saw copies of the Ames, in fact, I probably have here, the chapel, and I know it included HVAC and plumbing and.
Yeah, we were given copies of other projects in order to know how to base ours off of,
But
what was needed. And so this is basically generalized based on their generalized.
It's my memory, we had a pretty detailed bid from Ames.
Well, this is also pre-architecture. I mean, again, we're not an existing corporation that has funding to actually pay an architect to go in and lay out plans so that the contractors can then create, you know, that, well, line item bids. I mean, our hope is to get funding. Obviously, we're gonna have to have architectural plans drawn up in order to do any of this, and that is part of the project.
But we typically haven't awarded funds in the absence of seeing that kind of detail, so we can make determinations about what is a qualified historic preservation cost. Is the cost being submitted a reasonable one, especially where you're asking for public money? And I'll note, for example, that, I mean, for the Heritage Museum project, even though we had very substantial bid information, the first year that they applied, that they actually withdrew their application and waited another year to submit further information and to allow the project to become more mature. And the same thing actually happened with the Ames Chapel as well. The first year there was a submission, there wasn't an award, and as the project became more mature and we got more information, then there was an award.
I mean,
And I'm just thinking that a lot of this is pretty late in the game, and it's not the actual bid documents. There really aren't any signed bids from anybody. We don't have anything we can show to Roger Fernandez.
Well, everyone bases it, every contractor that look at, you're not gonna find it for under 200 to 250. That's what construction's going now.
A square foot.
It's not a magic formula we just grabbed out of the air. It's a case where that's what standard construction's going.
Yeah, but for example, interior sheetrock wouldn't be something that we'd probably be viewing as a historic preservation cost.
So do you have, I mean, we've asked this of a few different people in the town offices, where are the actual outlines of what we need to provide for you? Because that wasn't given to me at all, or to John, like the actual, you need an actual line item thing, or we would have obviously come prepared with that. All we were told was to have what we have, so
Well, I
they
think-
spent the time to do the breakdown this way. But if you're saying that's not what you need, then we can go back and get it.
Just from my memory, I think with the head house, for example, I think we had actual drawings.
Right.
So you want an
we had-
architectural.
I
We
think
have-
what we need is a project development, the project defined, project definition, and what that would involve initially would be the architect would develop the design, they develop the plans. From that, we could then have a contract, a couple of contractors, 3 ideally, put together an estimate based on that scope development. And then that's presented to the CPC, so not only do we have the basis of design, we have the basis of the scope. We have then the contractors which would come in, and that's the cost to actually build that. But then also within this are going to be the other soft costs, which are going to be the general conditions, they're going to be the site development costs, they're going to be the infrastructure and utility costs.
I think I'm just confused where I'm sorry, I don't know all of your names, but where you had asked me earlier, you said, well, we already know what the historic value of this property is,
Right.
you know, let's just get down to the costs. So now you're telling me in the cost, it needs to say which things are historic and which aren't. I mean, the whole building is historic. I don't really understand, as a taxpayer, how a wall is not part
We're
of the
probably
history
putting
of the house.
electrical systems into a house, an old house, I don't know if that's considered historical preservation, because I don't,
We're
Well,
not, we're not.
for example, when we evaluated the Heritage Museum project,
Yeah,
I think the total cost of the project was something like 2.9 million.
okay.
And about 2.2 million of that were qualified historic preservation costs. But if you're buying, you know, a refrigerator or putting in stove appliances in a kitchen, or remodeling a kitchen in the interior of a historic building, it's not really a historic preservation cost.
Okay.
And as we've discussed in the course of the process this year, you know, we are looking at too, an actual funding breakdown that is going to get us to a completed project. There is no doubt that, I think everybody on this committee thinks that it's tremendous historic property in Hingham. Certainly the Historical Commission thinks it's a wonderful historical preservation project. You and I and John have talked about this. It is a classic historical structure in Hingham. We'd love to see it get done, but in terms of what this committee does, there are certain things that we need to see, and we're just not there at this point.
I'm just wondering why that's not in writing somewhere, like on the website, or that you guys have, that you could have given me ahead of time and said, you know, this is what we need in order for you to present tonight, because I obviously would have done the homework, since I have obviously been doing all this other stuff, to have it, but I don't understand why that's just being like verbalized now and not something that was a preset, this is how you qualify to be here, type of thing.
Well, I know
Is that like a
you've
problem?
only been involved rather recently.
Well, I've been
but
here for 6 weeks, so
but-
that's more than enough time to get you a.
Well, I know when
bid.
the application was first received, and when I became the project manager for this, John and I had a discussion about these things.
What, did we have a discussion?
I'm just asking,
And I-
why isn't it in
I sent-
writing?
I sent you a lengthy email about
As far as.
the kinds of things that we would need.
So every project
And I
has to
thought
have
we
architectural
provided what
plans?
we needed.
Was
I
that a
thought-
prerequisite?
You didn't say that you needed, I didn't say anything that said you needed the actual contracts from builders. Before you get that, I'm gonna have to probably put out 25,000 in plans.
Right.
And you know what, I'll tell you, it's cheaper to build something new, it's cheaper to take it down and do new construction. I'm trying to restore something, if that's what the goal is. It's less money to put a new property, new building on that property.
Which is why, to
And
part
as
of your
far as
other
electric,
question, hold on,
people are
John.
saying, oh, it doesn't include electric, well, they just did the Abigail Adams house, and they put a brand new furnace in, and a heating system, and they do have electric. They did the Adams mansions, or the historic Adams houses over Franklin Street, Quincy, they had electric work done. So, I mean, alarm systems, all operate off electricity. They require heating to prevent the places from freezing up. I mean, some of those things are part of restoration.
Now, I think there's a pretty standard process when we're dealing with a historic building. It's similar to dealing with a new building, where you have to define the scope. And the way you define that scope is through basically an architect or an engineer. And on this project, it would be a preservation architect who would have consultants as an engineer. But to define that scope, it needs to be done professionally by a person who is a designer or who is an engineer. Now, as a developer, I see that you've done a very nice job articulating the historical scope and the historical basis. You know, what would legitimize this historically? What are the salient components of that? I think you've done a nice job doing that. But I think to develop this into a project scope that can then have a budget assigned to it, a budget that can be vetted and can be supported by 3 independent estimates, in order for any of these contractors to basically respond to your request, and I think I've seen this in the summary, is that people have put in some qualifications that they need to be, they can submit a quote, but they need a basis, a scope basis
Right.
around which to submit that quote. That, on a historical preservation project, would basically be developed by a preservation architect, who could take your program, your historical analysis, and your basis, and translate it into a scope that can be estimated. Because when I look at this, clearly there are ballpark numbers that can be assigned on a restoration project. And if you were to assign $250 to $300 a square foot on a wood frame building like this, you could do something significant in terms of a restoration. But what would not be included in CPC funding would be the renovation costs of support structures like the barn, which is not historic.
Right,
or
this has nothing to do
or
with
the
that.
site work, or any of the other enabling work that has to be done to make the restoration of this project happen. So in order for the CPC to qualify an investment to town meeting, propose an investment to town meeting, we'd need to know the overall cost of the project. So on this project, I would guess it's gonna be probably $1.2 million when everything is done. I'm just, on my own experience, just putting that out as a wild guess, but it's an educated guess. So within that, you would have certain costs that you would be requesting from the CPC. Now, other proponents, applicants, would come in and show us the overall scope, and then they would show the amount of money that they would be raising through fundraising, the amount of money that's, basically a three-legged stool. The CPC is not gonna fund $1 million,
Right.
but the CPC is looking to maximize through their funding to leverage the project, but we'd also wanna see what your other sources of funding would be. And that was the reason why I asked the question about the status of the nonprofit and what you're doing is that business. Because to me, isn't that what this project is about, to preserve a house, but also within the preservation of that house to be able to accommodate a new program or mission that would be this nonprofit corporation. That's what I understood, which is the reason why I was asking all those questions.
No,
Because I didn't see it. I didn't see it in the
understand that.
application.
So what the determination of it is, first of all, to back to your first question, was the permit that Mr. Pitts had applied for to tear the house down was actually rescinded at the historic, at the Greenbush meeting. They had asked if he would take that off if the money was gonna be granted. So he's already signed that, and that's not even on the table anymore, for one thing. We did that a few weeks ago. The second thing is, there was no criteria or demand for commitment from an architect, or that he would put the money out for an architect in order to do this. Part of the scope of the first level of this project is to pay an architect, obviously, to do that work, and then have the 4 people that we have the bids from to go in and resize their bid. You guys, CPC never just hands out a check anyway, so it was my understanding that we do it that way. We get the, an amount of money assigned to us, we get the architect in, and if there's, more money needed, then we need to go after that. If you guys awarded us more money than we needed to do the project, then you obviously keep that money. It's not something that they just write us a check for. So from my understanding, that's where we stood, because there were other projects that waited and asked for town funds and even state funds in order to hire an architect to do that piece of the development of their project as well. I don't think that this is anything new
No,
for
but I
us to
think,
do it.
but in order for us, looking at downside risk management and looking at this as an investment,
Yeah.
in order for the CPC to recommend a project to the town, we would have to have it vetted on a pretty thorough review of the basis, all of the scope, all of the estimates, everything. It's like going for a mortgage. You have to basically have a complete application, which basically says that, okay, it meets all the criteria, okay? It meets the preservation criteria because we've defined the scope in this project, and we've defined this aspect, which is the preservation aspect. The only way you can do that is with a set of drawings.
But can't you still do it the same way and say clearly CPC only allows the money to go to these historic things, so the use of construction for this amount of money can only go towards that?
There
Wouldn't it be
isn't-
the same difference?
But that would be the intent. That would not give you a document that you could measure the allocation of those monies to those scope areas. Because we, it
Is it
doesn't,
not
if
is it the same as Greenbush where it's a reimbursement program? Or is it just a check
Well,
out?
the work has to be done.
Right, so
mean,
wouldn't you
because
obviously see the
this-
receipt of the work that we're submitting in order to get the money for that, that it's obviously something that CPC covers?
We'd want to see that a contractor had completed phase one, or that such and such of work had been done, and then to the extent that CPA funds were
Appropriate for
going to-
that specific
going
piece
to
of
be
work.
spent for that, the CPA funds, or whatever percentage, would then be spent.
So couldn't
But,
I
for
just
example,
rework this?
in many,
No.
well, in many of our projects, we've actually looked at a planning phase first. But if we were going to do that here, for example, we would probably want to see a proposal from one or more architects as to what the cost would be, and what you would see as the CPA's role with respect to those costs. I mean, the eye on the prize is getting this property restored. I think everybody agrees that that's a beneficial thing for everyone, for the town, hopefully for Mr. Pitts, hopefully for the foundation. But we just have to follow certain processes with respect to making recommendations as to how public money is to be spent.
Absolutely. I mean, I've done the homework, and I've gone on the site, and I've read what the CPC committee is for. I've read what the bylaws are. As you know, I'm a law student, so I live for that mumbo jumbo. I have no problem understanding all of that, but I don't understand how it sounds like you're turning this project down in its current application on a technicality that isn't in writing or required anywhere as part of this application.
No, I think what we're
I don't
saying
think
is that
that's-
we don't have in front of us, we don't have a defined proposal in front of us that shows how much preservation money you are requesting that's based on a scope definition of the basis of the preservation design and scope that has been vetted by 3 independent estimates.
I understand
We don't
what
have
you're
that in front of
saying.
us, so it's all concept.
But what
We don't have
we
it.
were told is required is what I've provided you, so I don't understand how that's suddenly changed now that I'm sitting here and giving this presentation, that what I've given you isn't adequate enough, when we've gone to the offices in this town asking specifically and in detail, do you have it in writing, what do we need to provide, and we've run around and got what we thought is what you needed. So I don't understand why
But
if
you've
it's
seen,
more
but I'm
clear
not,
than
I
that.
wasn't at any of those, but what I don't understand is that if you've looked at if you've looked at typical projects, all of which follow the same protocol,
Right.
why this application is not coming in with that same protocol, that's what I don't understand.
Because they don't all have architects on them. I think that's the confusion. You're asking us to lay out the initial money to hire architects for this project to prove its validity. But my question is, again, just as I'm a local townsperson, I don't do this for a living, I live in this town, my husband grew up in this town. All I know is as a voter and as a taxpayer.
Look at all the projects, building projects that have come in for CPC preservation funding.
Mhm.
And the protocol is all the same. They all have a scope definition, they have the estimates, the scope is developed by an architect. All of the projects have that same protocol. This project needs to follow that protocol in order for us to get the information we need.
I just want to, Girl Scouts is a perfect example to take a look, and I'm sure that information, every single line item is right there, and as CPC members, we were able to go through those line items to see exactly what was being asked for us to fund. And
Was that done by an architect?
Pardon?
Was it done by an architect?
Yes.
I'm curious, just since Larry Linder's here from the chapel, and as you went through the process of defining a scope of work for Ames Chapel, had you engaged an architect, at whose expense, and in what part of the process?
We engaged an architect at our expense. What was the second question?
And where in the process? So, because I wasn't here for the first
At the
year.
very beginning of the process, before we applied for CPC funding the first time around. As Bob said, we were rejected for CPC funding that first year because we didn't have enough information. At that point, the documents that we gave you guys were about 80 pages long. We went back. The next year.
Did you say 8 or 80?
80.
80.
The next year, we came back and the document you have, is about 150 pages long. Because along with the cost estimates for each thing, there's just so much background material that goes into why this needs to be done this way in order to do that. Except they each have a book explaining the cost of the chapel. But as long as you brought this out to the public, I had another comment I wanted to make. I heard you saying that it's going to be a nonprofit organization for an animal rescue. And when I'm not raising money for the Ames Chapel, I work for the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine at Tufts University, so I know something about animal rescue. They have a shelter medicine program there. And essentially, there are two kinds of animal rescues in this country. One is a bricks and mortars building, where people administer the rescue in the building, and the dogs and cats are kept there. Another is a virtual rescue, where there is no bricks and mortars building, and administrators essentially work out of their homes, and people foster the dogs and cats until people adopt them. And when people want to go see about a dog or a cat, they go to that person's home. And this project, this 501(c) has been described as the house would be the headquarters for the rescue, and that would be the public benefit to the town. So I think a fair question for CPC to ask would be, do you mean for this 250-year-old house to be the bricks and mortar rescue where the 20 dogs and 20 cats?
No, we've said that from day one, that the animals are not going to be in the house.
So would it be that bricks and mortars building where all the animals are kept? And if not, if it's a virtual rescue where the animals are fostered, why would an entire, I assume something about 2,000 square foot historical house need to be the headquarters for the rescue with a kitchen and wonderful fireplaces and all of that? It seems to me a very unusual pairing of purpose with historic property. And I think CPC needs to understand why that property for that.
I can answer that. It's going to be a place that we're going to use it as fundraising to help other established nonprofits. I mean, it's almost like, why would someone want to go to a graveyard for a wedding or a bar mitzvah or something else? I mean, it's kind of strange that you want to do a function hall in a graveyard. However, that's what you want to do. What I want to do is have a place that's going to be in a busy area that we can have people come use the houses, house tours. There's a lot of people in Hingham that Cohasset and all that when they go into a nursing home or an assisted living complex, they can't bring the animals. We're going to try to find homes for them. We're not going to, the place is not zoned to have animals, so it's not going to be a place that we're going to house it. It's going to be administration. That's all. It's going to be an administration headquarters.
But are there going to be then house tours? Now it's kind of changing because
There's two organizations. One organization is NELAP, which is the New England League of Animal Protection, which would be a tenant of the Thomas Barker House and would use the Thomas Barker House as its administrative office. The other organization, which Tricia is heading up, would be a foundation, a historical foundation, the Thomas Barker House Foundation, whose primary goal would be to open the house to the public once restored and be on the Hingham House Tour. So there's two different organizations. I can understand why people were confused.
And that's what's been presented to the Historical Commission as well. That there'd be a foundation that would be the title owner. There'd be a tenant, which would have an animal protection role. And what the historic preservation is our objective. And I just want to come back to the question you asked about where does it say in writing?
Yeah,
It says right in the application.
okay.
On page 4, it says include the following if applicable. Architectural plans and specifications, parentheses, for new construction or rehabilitation, close parentheses.
This is on the application that's on our website, correct, Bob?
It's on the application that was submitted.
Yeah, and which comes from, yeah.
Historic structures report, existing conditions report, names and addresses of project architects, contractors, and consultants. other information useful for the committee to consider the project. Then we also asked for things about feasibility applications, historic preservation restrictions, those sorts of things. So it is in writing, it's in the initial document.
Right, but if applicable doesn't really tell me that I have to have it. It just says if it's applicable, so.
It says,
If that's
for
what we
new
need-
construction or rehabilitation.
Right.
This is rehabilitation.
Absolutely.
Right.
So, question being now, where do you want me to go from here? I mean, I think the use of it we get, and obviously you know my intentions pretty well, that my side of it is completely the historic side, and I want to open it up to the Historic Society so that we can have it be part of the house tours. I want to have it linked to the Boston museums. I'm working with the Dean of History in Boston in order to get it into all of his projects.
Well,
That's my big, it has nothing to do with the barn. The barn isn't part of this project.
this is a major project.
It is.
Kind of like Ames, and kind of like Heritage Museum.
Right.
It's not something that probably ever could have been put together in 4 months. As I said at the beginning of the meeting, we're looking for mature products that are kind of ready to go. I think there are probably two options that are going through my mind. And I know from the Historical Commission presentation that there is some immediate foundation work that probably is one of your priorities.
Right.
And to the extent that, sometime before our voting meeting next week, we could get, appropriate foundation quotes that somebody could actually look at and vet. We might be able to address one small aspect of that, or to the extent that, there's an architectural proposal that we could actually look at and vet. And time may not even permit that.
Right.
Otherwise, I would think that what we're really saying is, God bless you, you've made an appropriate start this year. You've got the attention of a lot of people in terms of the historical value of the property, the home. It's got a great history. I know some of the other things on the slide presentation are really wonderful. Come back to us next year with a mature proposal, and then, let us deal with it on the basis that we usually do.
I mean, we had last year, as we went to the warrant, we put forth a slate of warrant articles last year to town meeting for an array of things. We went through advisory committee, select board, town meeting. By and large, with the exception of the Heritage Museum, which was such an enormous undertaking to consider with a bond authorization, we went through pretty much unscathed. People understood it, there'd been a proper vetting, there was a lot of due diligence. I think the credibility and the due diligence people ascribed to this committee got us there, and the leadership of Bob and Dan Coughlin before that, and that we had really drilled into a lot of these projects to make sure that they were ready to get approved at town meeting. I'm guessing, based on our getting this information today, not having had a chance to digest it, understand what's behind it, the questions that Gary has raised in terms of the architectural review. A letter we have in our folder from Roger Fernandez, who has done yeoman's work on behalf of this committee to sharpen bids and make sure construction comes in actually under the warrant article, the town meeting line item numbers. That he's saying that this is not in any form that is consistent with how he evaluates public construction, which are the standards that the committee should adhere to, because this is public money. In a political context, we would have I believe, I can't project the future, a real fight in front of town meeting to get a warrant article for the Thomas Barker House through this year. There'd be so many questions, and that doesn't help us, and it certainly doesn't help you to to put something forward that people would ask a whole bunch of questions. They said, have you considered this, that, where are the architectural drawings? Have you scrutinized this? How much money will the project really cost? What if we fall short? Will our, because we just dealt with this with what's the building, the barn. Is this money enough to get it done? Is the chapel, do we have enough money to get it done? Without architectural drawings, with a lot of factors, and Gary's an architect, and Sally, who's not here tonight on our committee, is an architect, there's huge uncertainty. I also think that a town resident, taxpayer could rightfully say, where's your money now in shoring up some of this building? The owner. I also think that, let's say we didn't advance this year, and townspeople could also wonder, what have been the actions of the 501c3 owner of the property anticipated and tenant of the property? What have their activities been since incorporation in terms of defining how they would use this property? To Larry's question, what are these nonprofits doing, and how do they plan to, can they articulate in real discrete terms how they plan to use this building? We heard about a 207-year history of the Masonic chapter, the Masonic Lodge, and we heard about a nearly 100-year history of the Girl Scouts and what they've done for the public. So that's, town people are going to say, well, these are long-standing nonprofits in the community who are seeking our funding. Because it's a leap for us. We grapple a lot with putting forth any public money for non-town owned. We look and say, well, if we fund this nonprofit's X, what about the next nonprofit's X? This is an unknown nonprofit, or two nonprofits for town. And we have the issues with the Masonics and with the Girl Scouts, or with the chapel, or with the Historical Society, who are long-standing nonprofits. People could say, who are these nonprofits that you're giving money to? Because to them, it may just look like a private house. And that's what it is now.
Right.
Yeah, so.
And if I could just segue on that, as a taxpayer in Hingham, who has grown up watching that house deteriorate since the 80s, my question to this committee and to whoever's presenting this project is today would be, I would love to hear the history of why this thing was allowed to get into the condition it's currently in, why something wasn't done earlier, but more importantly, I have now heard, in listening to this and reading all the newspaper articles and all of the CPC meetings for some years now, I've heard it's owned privately. I've heard it's going to be turned into a 501c3. Now I'm hearing it's going to be turned into a 501c3 that's going to be rented into another 501c3. And I would like to know who owns, and I know who owns it. But this process is, we are giving now this much money to a private landholder who is then going to rescind his ownership or their ownership of this building to a 501c3 for a trust. Or this is very confusing and very problematic and concerning as a taxpayer to hear $1.2 million as a potential and to not have any idea who we're giving this to, and when it's done, who it will then be serving.
I can tell you.
So I think that these presentations and discussions, if you don't want them very confused, and we come to a lot of these meetings, we listen to a lot of proposals, and we sit through all of them for a reason.
Jennifer, could you just state your name for the record for the meeting?
Jennifer Bertner, 16 Powers Landing.
Thank you.
And I grew up watching this beautiful house deteriorate.
Well,
so I think that we are very interested in its historic
Well, if I was-
preservation and its importance.
Sorry.
I think
However,
our eye is on the prize. We would like to
we do
get the
we wish
preservation
to say,
accomplished.
But we don't
I think-
understand this process at all.
I think that's what Mr. Pitts would like to accomplish and what Tricia would like to accomplish.
I'll be glad to address any questions that.
Well, I wish I could
Well,
have finished
we-
my presentation because it actually hits on a lot of what you just asked.
We've now spent over 3 times
Right.
the allotted time on this. It's now 10 past 10 or almost. And
Wouldn't this have been the form, though, to get, that they would have been able to see that to
Could I
the
just
public?
comment on that just briefly? I think when we're dealing with a house that has this pedigree, which is what you're proposing in your document, that pedigree was there, is still there this house is basically a ruin. And if we're talking about preserving a building that's essentially a ruin, we need to have a historic structures report, and we need to have the professional eye on developing the preservation scope of this building. Because if this building is remodeled or renovated or done piecemeal, which has been going on for 35 years, this building is going to have no value if it's not done correctly. And it can't be done by anybody other than professionals who do this all the time. And that's the point I was trying to make in terms of the protocol. This cannot be done by, well, here's a certain aspect of this house that's falling apart that needs to be repaired. It has to have the proper repair. It can't be done inappropriately because the house is worth nothing at that point. We might as well not fund it unless it's got the proper specification and the proper scope developed. And that has to do with any building that's architecturally and historically appropriate.
I completely agree. I thought that's why, though, we had Bill Wilcox assigned to this project,
You
because...
need a historic structures report, and you need a preservation architect to come in with an appropriate proposal, which has been done on all of our projects that we have funded preservation money for. We're not funding renovation money. We're funding preservation money, and there's a big difference. And I think that we can't present this to the town unless it's properly vetted. And
We haven't seen anything in writing signed by Ben Wilcox either. So
And the taxpayers would expect to see.
I think we're starting to repeat ourselves.
Yeah.
I think,
It'll be-
Can I recap just a couple things, because you've come a tremendous long way. Your additional history that you're building here, it really exceeds a whole lot of our expectations of what really was there. We knew it was historic, and John Hersey, who is not here today, kept telling us how historic it was. You're proving it. So this, in its current state, having sat on advisory for 6 years, would get shot down in flames. You wouldn't have to worry about burning it. They take care of it for you. You have a ways to go, but you've got a tremendous path set for you, and Gary's pretty much laid out what you need to do. So if there's some small piece that between now and when we vote, that you all and Bob could come back with, just as you got some Greenbush money, perhaps there's something small that could be done here to set the stage for next year.
Yep.
And then come back with the architectural, all the different pieces.
I was struck that there was very honest in the major foundation work needed. Holding up the house and moving the stone, putting the concrete, putting the stone back, putting the house down again. There's a lot of major stuff implied here that needs to be spelled out. But I would think it'd be in your total interest to secure the house totally from now on. I mean, open windows, open back of the house, just.
My memory was, there was something more specific about the foundation work that the Historical Commission saw that I don't think we have in this file.
Everything that we presented before the historic is in the same
Okay.
PowerPoint, about the foundation.
No, I think there was actually a breakdown of what weatherproofing and foundation. and
Yeah,
that sort
it's
of
in the
thing.
PowerPoint, yep.
But I would like to just comment on the comment that you made. I think it's naive to just think of this just as the house. This is a hot potato property, and I've heard similar comments about people being up in arms. So I think it's more than just saying what you can do to, I think there's a whole education process of how this would all work.
Right.
And thinking that's all going to get done in 7 days
It's not.
is, I think, kind of
And your two
impossible.
foundations, you've got, those will be in place, and you'll be able to easily explain to people, and you've got a year to socialize it, how the two pieces work hand in hand.
And just to put some perspective on it, in terms of other recent CPC historic preservation projects, the head house, I think, started out 4 years ago with a planning phase, followed up by a historic preservation phase that has gone over a couple of years at this point in time. Heritage Museum had an application, withdrew it, had a planning phase, has had a funding phase, and they are going to start construction in the fall of 2014, but that's gone on for at least 3 years. Ames Chapel, same kind of way. There was a planning phase, and then there's the construction, cost phase where the costs are carefully looked at, and that's gone on for 3 years. So, I mean, you've only been with us on the CPC you've been with us for 6 weeks.
Right.
Lucky me.
John's been with us for 4 months. I think we've gone a long way down what may be a longer road.
Right.
I'd love to see this happen. Mr. Pitts, do you want the last word?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to, you were saying it could cost $1.2 million. There's only so many square feet there, and it's impossible unless you really don't know what you're doing to spend $1.2 million on that. You were asking how the property got into that condition. Well, when I bought it, it wasn't in the historic district. I was restoring it. I could have put vinyl siding on, I could have put Anderson crank-out windows, I could have defaced the property. I was working on it, we were working gung-ho. All of a sudden, I believe it was like 1987, the Historic District Commission expanded, and they were down Main Square. The very next day, I got a letter from them saying, stop work, come before us. I should have just kept working. I come in, then it was like
John?
today.
Wait, can we not get it? I can show you the
I-
PowerPoint if you want to see it, but
Offline.
we don't want to.
John, I think particularly because of the hour and because of our objective is the future restoration of this.
Well, I'm just answering the question.
I understand. I don't think we really want to go in that direction at this point in time. I think we'd like to keep things on as positive a note as possible in terms of getting this historic preservation done. And I think we've given you a good roadmap tonight.
And I think if you two want to have a conversation, it might not be, and John can finish his story, because there is a backstory to this.
Yeah.
It was in the presentation, Patricia did.
Yeah, but I didn't get to do the whole thing, so. But I'm happy to show it to you or anybody else in town at any time.
Sharing it with the town would be very helpful, because I think we can
Right.
have a personal conversation, but I think it's a conversation with the town that needs to.
I agree. I mean, that's a lot of why I volunteered to.
It would be very reasonable.
Totally.
But then
That's not, this resolution doesn't address that.
Okay,
Do we have another article on our calendar?
we do.
There is,
The last one, the CPC fund, which is a $50,000 item. We basically shortchanged ourselves last year. We took our own administration fund down to the last dime, putting Carol's and Roger's salaries at risk. We've somehow finessed that with help from the Conservation Fund, and I think it's a fund that we definitely need to build up this year. It's well within the 10% guidelines that we have in the CPA, and I don't think I need to say anything more about that at this point in time. And so there's one other thing I wanted to say tonight, and I'll say it tomorrow because Sally is not here. When we addressed grant awards for the Historical Commission, the procedure that we followed was that each member of the Historical Commission sent an individual email offering to the chair, Tom Wilson, offering their individual thoughts on how they would see the funding proposals going
For this year?
for this year.
Okay.
And that this was done so that Tom could try to see where consensus is, I don't know, consensi, where there was any consensus on particular articles, because it would facilitate the ultimate discussion with respect to grant awards. So if that makes sense to this commission, we did this last year with Dan Coughlin as well. If, I would invite each of you to send me your own private thoughts with respect to these proposals. I will try to synthesize things and report back to the committee, and hopefully it will allow us to facilitate a discussion of our actual recommendations for CPC grants.
Should we use the, I know Carol, I don't know, to be honest, I'm not sure if I have the online version, but there's that, in our things about, yeah, the amount that was
Could you
asked.
send that? That'd be helpful.
Yeah, and then we could put the, like, amount that we suggested, and then maybe we could just put a
Send it as a
comment, use
Word
it for
document,
comment,
and
and
we can
I think
comment
maybe
on
that'd
that.
be helpful to have it in
Yeah,
a
good idea.
template.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Make it a lot easier.
Yeah.
Keep it tight,
And-
yeah.
and Carol, you've given us our current funds in our handout
put a
this week.
remarks.
Yeah, like use part of this as a
So
remark
that's not likely to
section.
change before next week. So it's the
Let's see if I can,
1,592,618,
change
and
the Masons, though. Masons needs to be
something
changed.
better than, actually, the,
No, I know, but the ask. The ask. The ask.
So could you put our remarks column right so that we could comment?
Yeah.
yeah, the community housing reserve is 424,248. So people will take the amount we actually have to spend. If you take that 424,248 off of the 1,592,000, we're still going to end up with some money in the housing reserve. And we're going to have to set aside $146,000 for Heritage Museum.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because that's a required number at this
Right.
point, right?
Right,
Because of the bonding. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's in here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I think we have minutes.
I make a motion to accept the minutes. I read them, I edited them, I know they're good.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Take advantage of me.
Any further business? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.
Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, right?
Very well done.
Interesting.